The story begins on the 98th floor of the Labyrinth in Fullbrown, a labyrinthine city full of dreams where Heidi Marie, whom we will give the nickname Marie, watches not a bright one, but a dark nightmare happening between a gigantic sea creature and her friend, who lets out a creepy yet intimidating laugh amidst all of this. A few months prior to this event, Wimmy Strauss, who we will call Wimmy, an adventurer with a non-combat grantor job, which is basically an enchanter, is in the labyrinth's middle-level floor, trembling as he faces a mighty opponent with all his party members lying unconscious on the ground, unsure if they can still regain their consciousness, or is it the end for them? Unfortunately, he may be the next one on the list as the gigantic crocodile sets his eyes on Wimmy, growling to terrify the guy even more and make him shake like a little pup, helpless in the presence of the predator. Wimmy remembers the tail whip, directed at his adventuring party members, that starts this whole hopeless situation, triggering the desire within him to survive as he desperately comes up with ways to escape, but still concludes in the end that the only method is to brace himself for the upcoming battle. With a single chant, the aura around the grantor changes, and the thought of escaping alone enters his mind until he remembers the precious members of their group, Dragon's Wings, whom he feels very grateful for. Just then, Wimmy's creepy smile surfaces, and the giant crocodile feels the danger signs, which leads him to roar in false bravery to somehow threaten the once trembling enchanter. The story skips time a little bit, and we are then brought to the Dragon's Wings headquarters, where a small yet weird meeting is being held, now that Wimmy is becoming the center of unwanted attention, as he questions the decision of his companion, who is threatening him with a dangerous weapon. The party leader, Kronos, tells the enchanter to quote-unquote get lost and kicks him out of Dragon's Wings with the reason that, according to the mage, Malice, and the priest, Nakura is because he stole the spotlight on their previous labyrinth exploration. They are upset that a mere non-combatant is acting like their hero, even though they are the ones who weakened the gigantic crocodile. It turns out that Wimmy miraculously defeated the floor boss and is actually expecting he'll get praised by his comrades. Unfortunately, the opposite is happening right in front of his eyes, because the three are blaming him instead for casting insufficient flimsy buffs. Witnessing all of that, Wimmy concludes that these three must have hated him since the beginning, so he apologizes for all the incompetence he has shown, and tells them that their group is the only place that accepted him in this world, where grantors aren't in demand in adventuring parties, begging the three to let him stay. Fortunately, Kronos considers the deal and ultimately proposes a solution in the form of a duel where Wimmy's off-chance victory will surely grant his wish. The grantor immediately deems it impossible, however, as he is a non-combatant after all, leading him to let out a laugh which for Kronos is too unpleasant that he lifts his now former companion in the air, reprimanding him for being a beginner enchanter who can't even obey his simple commands. Eventually, Nakura stops their leader from inflicting more unnecessary damage, so Kronos just throws Wimmy as the last part of his outburst, while showing a face painted with envy that he isn't the one who defeated the gigantic Croco. However, the emotional injury has already been inflicted, and Wimmy can't do anything about it but contemplate his wasted efforts to repay the Dragon's Wings, right when he's becoming a mess. The door opens, and a long-eared lady, Sophia, arrives and barges into the room. Kronos reveals she will be Wimmy's replacement, and a much greater asset of a teammate, so he doesn't waste more time and approaches their former grantor, banishing him out from their group with a mere 2 sentences that definitely destroy the guy's mental state. In the lively labyrinthine city of Fullbrown, where the gifts from the labyrinth and the hunters/collectors of those treasures are gathered, as well as the merchants who sell the gold, silvers, and the unique materials one can get in the dangerous dungeon. In this typical isekai setting where adventurers should be with their beloved companion, Wimmy is losing the will to carry on as he wanders in the streets, muttering self-deprecatory statements like, "There's no adventuring parties to hire him anymore, and even those who are E-ranked or the inferior F levels won't consider the likes of him." After mumbling similar statements here and there, Wimmy arrives at a tavern and decides to enter it with the little to no money he has in hand. The waitress and receptionist named Greta greets the unhappy adventurer, and is all smiles, while praising the grantor for defeating a floor boss with his party, causing some middle-aged adventurers to sing congratulatory messages. On the other hand, Greta assumes that Wimmy wants to celebrate, given that the Dragon's Wings can be promoted to A rank because of their feat. However, the banished grantor orders the usual cheap sausage and spends his regular routine without the hint of a happy meal whatsoever, even though he lets out a habitual grin, which the guy hurriedly stops, thinking it's too disgusting, like what Kronos said. Seeing the lively group near him, Wimmy remembers the fun days when he was celebrating with his now former party members, spoiling the good taste of the afternoon lunch as the thought that there's no place for him anymore surfaces once more. Greta finally notices that Wimmy is acting strange, but her concerns are interrupted by Marie, who arrives in the tavern, panting as she calls for Wimmy. Meanwhile, in the Adventurer Guild, an ongoing report is occurring as the investigator named Dominic informs the guildmaster about their findings regarding the remains of the giant crocodile who was defeated by the dragon's wings. The guildmaster asks for more details about the subjugation, leading Dominic to reveal that the wounds of the floor boss aren't caused by sword slashes or magic, but instead by a machete, wherein the former has contributed a tiny amount to overwhelm the monster compared to the latter. With all this information, the guildmaster concludes the unthinkable thanks to Dominic's report, and asks the investigator if this is what he's implying. A non-combatant grantor who owns that machete has managed to defeat a floor boss. Going back minutes prior to the tavern scene, Marie is looking at a detailed map where she sees the hidden tracker Wimmy unconsciously wears going from the Dragon's Wings headquarters to the inn. She immediately looks for her wiretap device, and hears the conversation between Wimmy and Kronos, who she now hates to the very core, which leads to the current situation where Marie rushes to the tavern and looks for the expelled grantor, despite panting from all the running she did. Therefore, Greta welcomes the girl, albeit her greeting is mixed with a mocking nickname, calling Marie quote-unquote S-chan, where the S stands for stalker. Of course, Marie won't let it end in her defeat, so she calls the receptionist a cowgirl, only to face the harsh reality that there's no chance of winning when it comes to a bosom war against this cowgirl. Finally, Stalker wakes up from her senses and, out of the blue, asks Wimmy if he feels okay. The grantor then wonders if news about his banishment is already spreading like wildfire, but Marie is really proving that she's worthy of having such a strange nickname by revealing that the only one who knows it is her. And that's not all, as she's also aware of everything about the enchanter. Marie says it's because they come from the same village, though, and Wimmy, fortunately, buys that excuse and eventually reveals he got fired from the Dragon's Wings for all of the adventurers in the pub to hear. When they hear this news, the drunkard sympathizes with the young grantor and talks about his lack of achievement as someone who mainly does the group chores, assuming it may be the reason for the sudden expulsion, which also leads the atmosphere to go downhill from all the cheerfulness earlier. On the other hand, Marie and Wimmy are talking in more detail about the banishment and the replacement named Sophia, who looks like someone who can do the job better than the former member. S-chan thinks that the elf will just be an additional member of Kronos' woman, however, and even Wimmy is forced to treat the situation like that, especially after remembering how awkward it was to join their lovey-dovey conversation in the past. Thus, another creepy laugh lets out, and Marie can't help but point out to her friend his disability to fix his weird mannerism, leading Wimmy to once again assume that someone is feeling disgusted at him because of that smirk. However, it turns out that Marie thinks the complete opposite and actually likes Wimmy's smile, even though it is pretty revolting for someone else. As a result, a romantic assumption crosses the grantor's mind, and Miss Stalker lets him think that way without even acting all embarrassed and flustered, contrary to the young man who drinks his way out of the humiliation. Therefore, Marie yells the most awaited question, asking Wimmy why he got banished from the party when the one who defeated the gigantic crocodile is only him all along. In reply to the dumbfounded enchanter, the girl explains how the Dragon's Wings members beside him have nowhere enough strength to subdue the floor boss and continue disagreeing at Wimmy's idea, that it is only the finishing blow he has delivered, declaring that the whole thing is basically the grantor's solo subjugation. Unfortunately, Wimmy treats her words as an overestimation and still credits the achievement to Kronos and the two girl members for their skills and talent. In contrast, he wonders why Marie thinks highly of him in the first place, but Greta intervenes before she can even answer, saying no one in history has emerged victorious against a boss monster alone. Moreover, this receptionist treats Eshan's words earlier as delusions, to which Miss Stalker defends herself by revealing she has listened to a wiretapped conversation, proving there's no lie in her words. While they're in the middle of their conversation, Wimmy informs them that it's his own fault he got banished, but Marie will, of course, scold the enchanter and order him to stop acting so wimpy. She then forces Greta to hand her a cup of drink, despite knowing it'll be bad later, as Marie can't handle them very well. but she still receives one in the end, given they cannot do much about it. Thus, Eshan gives Wimi a passionate yet gibberish sermon about how conflicted his thoughts and decisions are, until she fails to carry on and just passes out on the table. Fortunately, the stalker-turned-boozer still has the strength to argue with Greta and orders one more cup until Wimi stops her once and for all, leading the girl to give her business card that shows the group name, Noct Label. That adventuring party is the strongest A-ranked in the whole of Full Brown, where Marie is part of and was recruited long ago, instantly making a name for herself as her career as an adventurer. That same Marie, however, is inviting Wimi out of the blue to come to their base and try working to gain experience with her help, of course, as she will vouch for him. Turns out Miss Stalker is not your run-of-the-mill adventurer, but the 74th Sage and a candidate to be one of the top brass of Noct Label for sure. That information is not only for show, but the night arrives with that powerful sage being carried by the banished Grantor, who thanks and bids temporary goodbye to Greta. The receptionist then warns him to be careful of drunk ruffians they may encounter on the streets, so Wimi leaves, keeping that in mind while contemplating the offer from Marie, and wonders if it's really okay for someone like him to join as he fears causing more trouble instead. And dear Eshan may come to hate him in the process. On their way home, however, some boozers are playing on the streets, throwing bottles at the target and talking about how they weren't able to precisely hit them. As they continue having fun, Wimi sneaks in the background and walking away without saying a word until one of them notices him and ultimately asks what in the world he is carrying. Marie's hiccup rings a bell, and a bad one at that, however, as the boozer realizes that she's the thief from the other day, the one who hoarded the snowball sweets from a certain shop by buying all their stock, including the limited time-only ones that they have been lining up for quite a long time. Wimi feels apologetic, yet dumbfounded that Marie is being called a robber due to some petty reasons, so he ignores the men's demands to wake the girl up and force her to apologize. Fed up with being ignored, the drunkard proceeds to do it himself, until a sudden enhancement ensues, and the Grantor's figure disappears along with Marie. Confused, they wonder where Wimi goes, only to hear from a slightly distant place the voice of the boy apologizing on behalf of Marie, as he has also eaten the snowball snacks with her. Seeing their reactions leads the Grantor to assume that the boozers become angrier, so he immediately takes his leave. Unaware that they're actually surprised that the girl is the famous Marie from Noct Label, and are amazed about Wimi's quickness that they assume he's also a part of that A-ranked party. Eventually, the enchanter runs a far distance from those boozers, and stops only when he determines it's safe enough from their threat. Marie also shows signs of waking up, but she still refuses to walk on her own, and just savors the privilege of being carried in the back, leading Wimi to go down memory lane of a few hours ago when he was reluctant to accept Marie's offer, afraid of causing more trouble to the twin-tailed stalker. Still, the young sage urges him to come to their headquarters and assures Wimi that he'll realize his infinite possibilities after joining the Noct Label. On top of that, the words reminding him to live life however he wants really hit right on the mark as the story returns to the present, where the Grantor thanks his friend out of the blue for accompanying him during these hard times. Moreover, Wimi returns the phrase to Marie and tells her to live freely and not be obligated to take care of him anymore, to which the sage replies and explains he gets it all wrong, and obligation is definitely not the word to describe her actions. The maiden in love's face flushes in pinkish red, and she refuses to explain any further, unaware that the confusion Wimi feels thanks to that is slowly becoming that of horror, as he remembers Marie saying she knows everything about him. The next day, in the party house of Noct Label, the largest and strongest A-ranked party with over 100 members, a suspicious person named Wimi is wandering around walking in circles and taking glances at the guard, Abel, who senses something wrong in the weird-looking guy. He eventually asks the Grantor if there's something he needs, so Wimi, despite being clearly shaken up, grabs something from his pocket, which causes Abel to draw his weapon, thinking that the suspicious guy is raring for a battle until he sees the business card in Wimi's hands. However, Abel still has a strange reaction upon knowing that Wimi is the friend of Marie, whom he calls hers, rather than the proper pronoun her, which is too weird even for the banished Grantor. Eventually, Marie arrives to guide Wimi inside the sparkling and luxurious hall of the famous Noct Label's headquarters, which leaves the banished enchanter totally flabbergasted, thinking how this establishment looks more like a mansion than a mere party house, which he is used to. While the guy is immersed, however, Abel apologizes for mistreating him mainly because his features don't match what he was told about. So Marie scolds Abel only to get counterattacked after the guard reveals her, saying that Wimmy is a gallant man. The red-faced sage immediately denies that she says those words, although her reaction screams the complete opposite, resorting to divert the Grantor's attention onto the large door where the top brass and higher-ranking members are gathered. Without further ado, Marie introduces her friend to their party member, who we will refer to as Camilla, the woman dubbed as the Silverhair. Camilla looks quite intrigued at the young man, who she then approaches casually in spite of her intimidating figure, only to comment that Wimmy is quote-unquote smaller than I've thought, emphasizing the tad bit of disappointment she feels due to Marie overhyping her friend by calling him a handsome and masculine man to everyone. Ignoring Eshan's desperate denial, Camilla welcomes Wimmy to their adventuring party, so the Grantor introduces himself as a Dragon's Wings member, forgetting for a moment that he is, in fact, expelled. Afterward, Camilla assures the enchanter that anyone capable is absolutely welcome in Nacht Label, so she asks what Wimmy's job is at his former group, only to learn that he's a chores boy and someone who focuses on office work. Marie disagrees with him, saying only the boring parts though, while the party leader, on the other hand, assigns Wimmy to search the enemy's location for their upcoming dungeon dive. Unfortunately, the information is still new to the Grantor that he's making a commotion out of it, complaining as it is the first time he'll explore the dungeon alongside so many people. Thus, Marie tells him it'll be okay, but it is clearly evident that Wimmy is not buying any of that assurance. Eventually, the group arrives in the monster-filled dungeon, thanks to a teleportation circle scattered at each level of the labyrinth. Turns out, multiple teleportation locations appear on each floor if a party defeats the boss-level monster, which varies from normal ones that can deliver a group to the next stage, and the special circles that can jump multiple floors. As Nacht Label continues marching, a man suddenly stops and signals something to Marie, which leads her to call Wimmy and hand him a blindfold, preventing the Grantor from seeing the exclusive teleportation line they'll be going to use as he is still an outsider after all. Wimmy instantly understands what that means and doesn't retaliate to their wish, perhaps because it means holding the hands of the young maiden. Of course, the awkward silence means it's not the case, but Miss Stalker is savoring every moment of it as she teases Wimmy for holding her hand so brazenly. Marie then tells him it's okay, however, but it becomes too late as the embarrassed Grantor chooses to hold on to the girl's shoulder instead. When they reach the notorious 97th floor, Wimmy is finally free from the shackles of the blindfold and can finally enjoy being impressed at the strongest A-rank party. Unfortunately, he's still suffering from the thought that someone like him will just be a heavy burden to the team, unaware that Camilla and Marie are talking about him, where the former finds out that the guy is an overly nervous and cautious person. Thus, she smacks the boy's back and reminds him not to be so tense, especially because he is one of the Dragon's Wings, the party who beats them first into defeating the gigantic crocodile boss of this floor. Furthermore, Camilla reveals that mapping is their primary objective and not some dangerous stuff, which relieves the non-combatant Grantor, and he's becoming sure that everyone in the party is a good person. However, the echoes of unfamiliar words destroy that fleeting peace of mind, turning that into alarm as Wimmy looks around for potential threats, but ultimately assumes it's just his imagination, as it turns out that he's the only one who can hear it. Thinking it might be an omen to some trap, Marie advises Wimmy to report it, but the Grantor delays it for now and extends the range of the search skill instead, and checks the interior of the floor just in case something terrible is happening. Wimmy is taken aback by the result, so Marie reminds him to inform Camilla about it, which he eventually does as the transmission magic activates while their leader is on the front line leading their exploration. There's no beating around the bush, and the Grantor tells her about a rockfall trap 45 meters ahead on the upper left side, but tells Camilla he's only 90% sure about its existence. However, the probability is of no importance to the leader, and she orders Wimmy to use the public channel when communicating, leading the Grantor to alter the properties of the search magic despite how nervous he feels. In the minds of every Nacht Label member present, telepathy resounds and informs them not just of the type and location of the trap, but also of its estimated weight and shape. Therefore, the adventurers can't help but gasp in surprise after hearing the very detailed report, but the not-so-confident Grantor will, of course, assume that he did the presentation wrong. Putting all of that aside, Camilla assigns Abel to block the boulder himself, so the adventurer in knight's armor goes in the direction all alone until he finally steps onto the trap, emitting the typical blinding light that signals the activation. Immediately, the column-shaped pillar falls straight to Abel, but the large shield proves to be triumphant in the end as the rock ultimately turns into pieces of debris. Abel immediately reports his success in clearing the trap, but instead of celebratory noises, the adventurers are thrown into confusion and disbelief that it has been predicted so accurately that they come to think this is the real power of the dragon's wings. While Wimmy is under the assumption that he messed up badly, Marie, on the one hand, enjoys watching the dumbfounded faces of her party members. After a few more series of accurate trap detections, it seems like the higher-ups are spending their limited minutes of rest talking about how unbelievable Wimmy is performing. Thus, it is inevitable even for Camilla not to think about the dragon's wings, whose speed run to being B-ranked even with just 4 members in a span of a few years, wondering why in the world Wimmy was kicked out in spite of his advanced level abilities. She then hears another mind transmission from the Grantor, who informs her about the rising humidity and the strange rarity of low-level monsters, implying the possibility that they must be in a gigantic monster's territory, the great tortoise Zeratin, who is strong enough that avoiding the battle with some detours might be the best course. Once again, Wimmy is just 90% sure, so Camilla, who is a tad bit disappointed, reminds him to use public transmission when reporting dangers like this. Wimmy realizes that he has really messed it up this time, and the sudden reassigning of his position from the search unit to the battle team adds to that worry, until Camilla reveals her plan to fight the Great Tortoise instead, telling Wimmy that she wants to witness his Grantor skills in real battle. The pressure of not failing gets into him, but Wimmy still assures the leader he'll do his best, albeit his current state of mind might not be the best fit, as all this Grantor can think is not to make a mistake. Noticing her friend's behavior, Marie asks Camilla's permission to let her accompany Wimmy, given that she's the one who's the most used to receiving the guy's buff among all present. Fortunately, Camilla is not so heartless as to reject the proposal, so Miss Stalker urges his sole and usual target to show them what he's made of. Time skips a little bit, and we can see Wimmy clearly troubled about his choices in life, doubting his motto to figure out what things he can do to help others in need. After all, the unappetizing sight in front of his eyes, depicting the great tortoise devouring raw seafood, is so much for him that his hands are trembling in fear. In contrast, Marie thinks it's a great opportunity to strike, while the monster is still distracted, and everyone is there to witness how great of an enchanter he is. Unfortunately, their stares are absolutely terrifying for Wimmy, and he's once again overwhelmed and pressured to do his best to make up for the mistakes he has committed. Ignoring the murmurs and self-deprecatory statements of the anxious Grantor, Marie calls her friend's name until he notices it, and tells him to go with their usual routine using the ice spear plan. Wimmy is taken aback by the words, as usual, and watching the girl's back brings him down memory lane when the two of them are diving the dungeon all by themselves, giving him the courage needed to continue the subjugation plan without fear or hesitation whatsoever. The sage is pretty much the same, if not more motivated, as she assembles her weapon and tells the guy to show off what they're really made of. Before that, Marie brags about how great she is for modifying the magic stone of her weapon before finally generating vast magic power atop the gigantic tortoise. Thanks to the flashy display, the turtle notices the incoming attack, except that it's too late when he realizes that the magic has already been solidified into a Doombringer spear. Wimmy feels impressed witnessing his friend's ancient magic once again, as it turns out that this ability is only possible because she possesses the rare job of being a sage. With that said, a short infomercial ensues and shows the nature of the two types of magic, the basic ones that everyone can use, such as transmission and enemy search, and the so-called application magic that is unique for each job, whether they are a warrior, sorcerer, or a grantor like Wimmy, standing on top of all that is the sage, who is said to be the strongest, given that they can use all types of magic and ultimately create new ones. Thus, the commercial finally ends, and we are brought back to the extermination project, where Marie declares her approval to be bestowed buffs from none other than the Grantor, who also agrees to grant the girl his enchantments. Now, the formalities are finished, and Wimmy switches gears to perform the solidifying enhancement, forming a visible line that gets attached to the magic circle of the ice spear to allow the buff to activate. At this point, Camilla and her subordinates are still bystanders, simply watching and analyzing every corner of the Grantor's skills, while the magical weapon, on the other hand, is utterly slaying the spotlight and is 100% raring to slay the high-level beast, who is charging toward the two adventurers in a speed that is totally out of character, considering he's a large turtle. Their voices overlapping, Wimmy and Marie yell the chant that signals the ice spear to rain down the mystical beast, creating a massive and powerful impact that obliterates the great tortoise in one hit. Of course, this unprecedented situation leaves everyone except Camilla baffled, and with their jaws dropped, the group greets the aftermath of the collision as the rubbles fly toward them, with their leader the only one unfazed and seriously fixated on the figure of the advanced-level dungeon monster, lying lifeless on the ground due to the spear's damage. Due to the coldness, however, Wimmy apologizes for raising the ice's power output more than what's necessary. But that isn't a big deal for Marie in the first place, as she simply proceeds to ask Camilla her opinions about Wimmy's battle prowess. In reply, the adventuring party leader brushes off the icy dust in her armor, so it goes without saying that the guy assumes he made a mistake again, especially because Camilla doesn't bother to praise him and just orders Wimmy to grant buffs at the shield unit next, as they'll now head to a wyvern the search group leader found. She then leaves with vague words of wanting to see the guy's defensive enchantments, causing Wimmy to treat that one sentence as both a second chance and a warning to ensure good results the next time around. Marie can't stop letting out a sigh thanks to the overthinker, but that doesn't stop this proud misstalker from taking delight in listening to the conversation of the bewildered adventurers who are talking about Wimmy's greatness until they decide to label the pitiful guy quote-unquote odd, of course. A few minutes later, Wimmy meets up with the shield unit and does a bit of a self-introduction, mainly from Abel, who is revealed to be the squad's leader. The Grantor is initially pleased to meet him, but it eventually turns into discomfort as Wimmy stutters, having no idea how to talk with someone he's not familiar with. Therefore, the overly anxious enchanter imagines Abel feeling disgusted at his presence, like what happened with Kronos and the others, but the squad leader's gentle smile seems to ease those exaggerated worries, making Wimmy relieved that he's already blushing. Putting that aside, Abel inquires more about the defensive buffs they'll receive because they don't have that much experience with Grantors, as the one the Noct label had in the past is now a mere rumor for the current generations. As a result, Wimmy informs them that their declaration of approval is needed for the Grantor to freely give them buffs, such as physical enhancements or weapon strengthening and the like. That said, a Grantor can only bestow them to those who are willing, which is definitely not like this man who suddenly interrupts to reveal his hate for receiving buffs. Fortunately, the guard squad member named Mark doesn't mean to be rude at all, and he just seems to dislike enhancements because of the physical changes he had experienced when dungeon diving with a Grantor before, where he lost control of his body and other bad, yet probably not so serious effects Mark has suffered. Wimmy assures him it won't happen, however, as he can only use beginner-level enchantments and a complex combination that renders those concerns useless. Unfortunately, Mark doesn't feel the slightest bit pleased with his explanations and views that basic knowledge is insults, urging Wimmy to dive into in-depth details. When the guy's anxiety attacks again, Abel reveals his desire to learn more about the Grant too, forcing Wimmy to realize he's facing experienced veterans who may possibly be already aware if it's just a job's common knowledge. Once again, he tells them not to worry about weird changes in their senses, but as if Mark will easily believe those unreliable words when he, in fact, questions the unbelievable possibility of buffs having no possible harmful effects whatsoever. Wimmy reveals it's just how his Grantor skill works, though, and this guy is already enjoying this rare opportunity where he can talk freely about how his ability operates by explaining it in a long, complicated, and hard-to-understand way. Even though they're clearly troubled, the SHIELD squad desperately comes up with a reply about various physiques, strength, and whatever, which fortunately turns out to be correct according to the Grantor, who feels elated at this whole situation. This time, Wimmy is getting carried away and continues to talk jibber-jabber about his Grantor abilities until he realizes that his speech has gone too far. The SHIELD squad tells him it's okay, though, so they have themselves to blame for the enchanter carrying on with his gibberish teaching session. Eventually, Mark stops the young man from saying more about the topic, even though the price for it is an awkward mood between his group and the Grantor. Turns out, however, that he understands that Wimmy can grant dozens of buffs simultaneously, with a clever application method due to his low mana reserves. As a final push, Mark asks if there'll be really no change in his senses, and learning that it'll improve, to say the least, convinces the man to declare his approval in receiving enchantments from Wimmy. Even the Grantor can't believe it, but Mark, who's supposed to be a tough nut to crack, has really put his trust in the young, knowledgeable enchanter who is on the verge of tears. Wasting time is not in Wimmy's vocabulary, though, and he instantly grants a strengthening buff to Mark's body, so what awaits after the enchantment is the squad members' reaction. A few minutes have passed since then, and we can see Mark and Abel savoring the fresh feeling of the physical enchantment until the former leaps toward the latter to land a 100% smash. Immediately after blocking, Abel counters with a kick, only for it to get deflected in the end, and their exchange of blows continues. Wimmy is getting impatient and worried while watching the sparring as he then asks for Mark's opinions and receives the much-appreciated thank you from the warrior, who is getting exhilarated by the surreal physical boost. Like him, Abel senses the enhanced movements thanks to their lighter bodies, so they continue the mock duel, while the remaining squad members, on the other hand, are practically begging, although in a good way, to be bestowed with buffs from the grantor. Eventually, their squads get to know bonding ends, and the whole party members head to the Wyvern's lair, preparing for their subjugation plan against the winged monster. In spite of his noticeable trembling, Wimmy assures Camilla that he'll go as planned, and this nervousness is just something not out of the ordinary. While he's talking, the beast finally makes its appearance, so Camilla orders everyone to brace themselves now that the demonic wyvern enters the stage to, of course, annihilate these adventurers/dungeon intruders. The monster lets out a terrifying growl directed at Nacht Liebel, but Camilla knows he's just charging for a powerful breath attack, so she immediately warns the squad unit to prepare for the incoming danger. At last, the wyvern releases the fireball and sends it straight to the shield unit, which deflects it with a single yet enormous barrier that successfully defends them from the fire breath. That ultimately returns to the wyvern in an unpleasant and surely painful reunion. It goes without saying that Wimmy is impressed upon witnessing the unit's flabbergasting performance, but it seems like even Mark and Abel are dumbfounded that they successfully reflect the attack and are in utter disbelief because this feat has never before seen even for this group of elites. Therefore, Mark can't stop grinning in amazement even though the battle is not ending yet, and this time, Camilla gives the long-range troops time to shine. Afterward, a bunch of mages, including Marie, rain down an ice thunder spear to the winged beast, which hits the wyvern but still proves to be insufficient as a final blow, given that he is still alive and kicking. Seeing that triggers Wimmy to notice the peculiar features of the monster, leading him to assume it is a subspecies rather than a pure wyvern. Upon learning that the grantor also sees it, Camilla smiles out of the blue before telling the shield unit via transmission to fall back, as she will handle the rest and defeat the winged monster. No questions are needed to ask, and Abel retreats with his squad while Camilla is too distracted thinking about the shield unit's miraculous barrier earlier, which turns out to be a secret technique known as shield roll. Thus, it's becoming clear that all of that is thanks to Wimmy, who grants the defensive troops incredible buffs, making the previously serious party leader grin in excitement to also be showered by Wimmy's enchantments. Without further ado, Camilla uses the transmission skill to ask the grantor to enhance her with physical buffs, saying that she wants to receive a full attack enchantment. She then finds out that Wimmy can increase one's strength 3 times using a maximum enhancement, which is already quite impressive, but is still not enough for the party leader, who wants him to go even further instead of playing it safe. Obviously, Wimmy refuses because of the underlying risk, but Camilla wants a 10-fold strength multiplier, which forces him to go out of his wits in worry and terror about the power-loving party leader. He informs Camilla that her wish is possible, but the potential drawback can become more and more unbearable, yet she's still willing to take the risk, assuring Wimmy that no one will blame him even if he fails. As Camilla declares her grant approval, the poor enhancer decides not to argue anymore and proceeds to analyze the leader's body structure first, wherein he learns that her muscles and bones are too extraordinary for a human. The amazement doesn't stop the grantor from commencing his mini enhancements, and ultimately puts a combination of buffs to Camilla, emitting a magical light that activates the numerous boosts bestowed on the strongest war freak of Nacht Liebel. Overwhelmed with exhilaration, Camilla heads toward the enemy using her magical sword, Giant's Hunter. She faces the winged beast without fear whatsoever, and leaps above at a height that is higher than where the flying monster is, thanks to her initial strength and the buffs layered inside and around the adventurer's figure. With a skill called duplication, Camilla's weapon grows in size in an intimidating yet eye-catching form, which amazes Wimmy and baffles the usual Nacht Liebel members because they know that its largeness shouldn't be that way. Putting their reactions aside, Camilla goes into a fighting stance, wondering how strong her next attack will be because even she doesn't know what in the world will happen in the approaching collision. Without further delay, Camilla swings her enormous giant hunter to hunt the demonic wyvern, slamming the large magic sword onto the dungeon beast's head, which also destroys a part of the 97th floor, turning the pillars into rubble and the wyvern into nothing but eyes. Of course, dumbfounded reactions aren't something to miss, but seeing the rare, satisfied smile of their party leader causes the adventurers to let out dry laughs, which eventually become yells of celebration. On the contrary, Wimmy feels worried about the possible side effects of the risky buffs he grants, but Camilla replies to the boys' concerns with a compliment, showing her satisfaction in savoring high-level enchantments. Then she learns that the danger involved has only a 5% chance of occurring and is just slight discomfort in the form of muscle tears, shocking Camilla to a tremendous degree upon hearing that it's not a serious problem, other than what the grantor portrayed it to be. On top of that, she learns that even wounds are not doomed to happen, which leads her to burst into laughter while thinking about how odd and funny the skilled all-around grantor is, awakening the desire within Camilla to hire the guy for their adventuring party at all costs. Unfortunately, Wimmy has no idea about this yet, and he's just confused about why Camilla can't stop laughing. At night in the Knockedly Bell's mansion, the adventuring party celebrates the great success of their dungeon expedition, as they, after all, improved their map on the 97th floor, subjugated high-level monsters, and discovered a gold vein to top it off. Therefore, a grand feast is being held inside the party house, where everyone has smiles on their faces except Wimmy, who is clearly troubled by his bosom encounter with a party member who acts so chummy at him mainly because of her admiration. The mage, Monica, shows her amazement at the guy's skills, aware that it requires vast amounts of knowledge to pull off, and continues to shower Wimmy with genuine praises, even though the grantor can only give him nervous replies mixed with stuttering. While he's wondering how to reply to this girl who's practically a stranger, Simon, the search unit leader, and his squad member Bettina join the conversation to talk about the grantor's intriguing search skills. Little do they know that their arrival is actually a godsend for this socially awkward boy, who reveals how much he idolizes the famous Simon by reading his books. Hence, they discuss the trap the search unit leader is devising until Mark arrives to give them a word about talking about such things in the banquet, when they should just drink instead. Unfortunately for Simon, the boozer absolutely ignores his displeasure and wants him to enjoy the beverages together. Mark then takes a seat, scoots closer to Wimmy, and compliments the enhancements he grants to them, which triggers the earlier reflective barrier. As usual, Wimmy credits it all to the own skills of the shield unit and makes it look like his assistance is just a little help, but Mark simply laughs it off, confident that the young enchanter will definitely go to places. Abel feels the same admiration too, leading him to apologize for the rudeness he has shown in their first meeting, to which Wimmy replies it's fine as he really is acting suspicious at that time. Worried that his actions are spoiling everyone's mood, Wimmy lets out his habitual laugh and the atmosphere turns silent because of that, so the grantor decides to delete himself due to all this humiliation. Abel immediately stops Wimmy from doing dangerous things and tells him that Marie has already told them about the guy's hobby of immersing in his own world, and Mark tops that off with a don't worry while inviting the grantor to officially join Knockedly Bell. Along with his be part of the A-ranked adventuring party, Wimmy finds happiness from being praised by everybody, and comes to think that this must be where he belongs, wishing that joining Knockedly Bell will be truly possible. Eventually, Marie appears while she's gobbling meat and exchanges greetings with her friend before taking a seat. The sage then shows how great she is by presenting the disappearance of meat, but eventually changes the topic to how popular Wimmy is becoming. The grantor still doesn't appreciate his strength, however, and it is becoming troubling even for Marie as she wants Wimmy to know that his power captivates even their leader. Hearing Camilla's name, Wimmy remembers his business with her as he then leaves toward the office where the party leader is, according to Marie. With that said, the story brings us to Camilla, who is sorting the paperwork and reports about their whole dungeon dive, feeling problematic if she can finish all of that in a day. Thus, she takes a short break and contemplates the significant success of their team, along with the excellent performance Wimmy has shown them. Afterward, Camilla relives the physical and weapon enhancement she experiences, and compares it to having a pair of wings mainly because her state and abilities are in top shape at that time. Once again, Camilla shows a pretty satisfied look, just by remembering the sensation of the buffs, and then stumbles into a bright idea to use those enchantments in training, hoping she can achieve greater heights with Wimi's help. Speaking of the devil, the grantor knocks on the door and enters it after getting Camilla's permission, as he then hands over the report to be presented to the guild. The leader is confused about what it is all about, though, so Wimi explains doing paperwork on his own as he's still not an official member after all, and it's his responsibility as an outsider. When she reads the report, Camilla finds out that combining it with the one she made will definitely not be a problem, and will be, in fact, a helping hand to allow her to finish the documents in time. With that sorted out, Camilla asks Wimi what the odd jobs he did in the Dragon's Wings are, causing the grantor boy to reveal he's doing everything, including accounting, except for having a big role in major battles. However, hearing that leads Camilla to think that Wimi is already starting their negotiations because he's showing off his worth by giving the report and talking about how valuable his abilities are after all. Moreover, this warrior lady assumes that Wimi is a calculating person deep inside, which also makes her excited to continue the bargaining, unaware that Wimi is nothing like what she thinks he is. Camilla will, of course, continue the business talks and offer the grantor 500 milk, their world's currency, which is more or less $20 for every coin. Even now, Wimi has absolutely zero idea about what in the world is occurring, while Camilla, on the other hand, goes on with her tempting offers that will turn the guy into an instant millionaire. She also thinks that Wimi's dumbfounded face is a mere act to hide his cards and play them right at the moment when the proposed selling price becomes the highest. Even how absurd she assumes the situation is, Camilla refuses to let go of Wimi and desires to hire him right here and then, forcing her to offer a total of 3,700 mercs for today's dungeon dive reward, and a special allowance just for joining. On top of that, there's a 600 monthly salary, so Wimi is undoubtedly getting the miracle job proposal he deserves. And yet the grantor is in disbelief, thinking that this whole thing is some kind of prank. In contrast, Camilla is still under the assumption that Wimi is a calculating person, so she proposes to double the guy's salary in Dragon's Wings. When Camilla's guess about Wimi's former wage is getting crazier and crazier, the banished grantor reveals that he's getting a mere 20 mercs per month in his ex-adventuring party. The shock is evident in Noct Libel's leader to the point that she gets up from her seat, thinking it's a meager salary for an adventurer who's risking his life. Unfortunately, none of it is a joke from what she can see on Wimi's face, and in reality, the grantor doesn't force Camilla to give his share of the reward, even though he'll surely appreciate it. Wimi then runs away without even accepting the job offer, and leaves Camilla dumbfounded as she ponders why Wimi is being paid 20 mercs when his value is definitely more than that. In the end, it boils down to the harsh treatment of the members of the Dragon's Wings, because Camilla is now wondering what kind of B-ranked party they are. On the 35th floor of the labyrinth, the shadows of adventurers can be seen running away from a horde of goblins. It turns out that one of them is Kronos, who contemplates this unexpected hardship, even though he initially thinks that their lives as Dragon's Wings will be much easier now. That Wimi has been kicked out, and an additional combatant has been added to their group. Thanks to that, Kronos is sure they'll be promoted to A rank and will be able to go to the dungeon's deepest part. Yet the current situation where he is full of wounds and the healing is not keeping up, unlike the usual, is bringing this arrogant leader at his wit's end. He then checks if Melissa's magical chant has been completed, and learns that he still needs to wait for a few more seconds before the mage finally casts the middle-level flame veil. With the flames blocking the path for the goblins, the Dragon's Wings hurriedly sprint away from the monster's territory until they reach a somewhat safe place. Kronos' irritation still lingers, however, as he complains to Nekor about the slow treatment of his wounds, to which the priest apologizes and reveals she's not feeling well. Thankfully, Kronos calms down when he hears that and says sorry for being overly irritable before thanking the girl for her healing spells, inviting the whole party to take a short rest and recover for the time being. Like the leader he is, Kronos urges his team to head back and fight the goblins again, but tells them to confirm their position first by finding a landmark. Therefore, Melissa asks what kind of landmark they are specifically looking for, but even Kronos is speechless for a moment, before revealing that he also has zero knowledge when it comes to location and mapping. Nekor also shakes her head to inform them that she's also uneducated, while Sophia, on the other hand, says she's the same. Although that is not the elf's main concern, because behind her lies a corner within the walls, meaning there's no place for them to run away anymore. There's no speech or words of assurance from Kronos anymore, and only despair is painted on his face as they listen to the noises of the approaching goblins. Time skips a bit, and the story transitions into the Dragon's Wings party house, where we can see Melissa taking care of Nekor, who lies on the bed sick and injured. Hearing the cough the priest emits after drinking a glass of water, Kronos barges into the ladies' room unannounced with a plate full of apples in his hand, except that those fruits are sliced by Sophia and not him. After spoon-feeding Nekor, he discusses their next plan, which is to take another rest, thinking that their wounds from the battle with the crocodile are still not fully healed. Kronos blames himself for their failures, but the girls will, of course, refuse to resent their crush just because of his mistake. Therefore, Kronos gives those girls, who are head over heels for him, a friendly embrace, while also encouraging those two to work hard together again and return to the labyrinth when they're fully recovered, to which they reply with a shouting, "Yes!" But while there are lovey-dovey protagonist harem moments over there, Sophia isn't the slightest hopeful, as she laments their previous dungeon dive and thinks how clumsy, messy, and chaotic their strategy is. She remembers resorting to a flashbang skill to blind the goblins and secure their escape route without engaging in a battle they will definitely lose, and feels disappointed about the performance of a B-rank adventuring party who is rumored to have defeated a powerful floor boss. In addition, the piled-up documents prove to be overwhelming for Sophia, who is confident that she can finish organizing them, albeit in a very long time, as it is just impossible to sort them out. Turns out, Kronos asks her to arrange all that paperwork, and blames Wimmy for leaving them like that, and even goes so far as calling him quote-unquote useless. He also acts all-important, and offers a helping hand if the task is too much for her. But it seems like Sophia is actually thinking the opposite this whole time, because the documents are already organized and categorized from reports, supply delivery and house repair plans, and even maps of all charted floors, as well as monster descriptions. Finally, Sophia is becoming aware that the one she has replaced was a valuable asset for the team, and a helpful grantor, contrary to what he is portrayed by his now former companions. Thus, this elf begins to question whether their leader Kronos is useful to the Dragon's Wings, or just a simpleton womanizer. The story goes back in time, and we can see Wimmy engaging in a sparring match against Kronos. With his swordsmanship, the party leader wins the duel one-sidedly, and he continues to do so until it hits the grantor's wrist, and Wimmy sits down in pain and defeat. Kronos feels disappointed, but he still orders Nekor to do her thing, which leads the priest-type adventurer to heal the guy's wounds, although she's doing it only for the sake of their leader, and tells Wimmy to change and be useful for Kronos even once. Ignoring the enhancer's apology, Melis orders him to get up, and Wimmy does as the girl says as he prepares himself for another sparring. But instead of being thankful, this conceited narcissist reminds the grantor that there's no one who'll hire him other than them. Unaware it's not the case in the present, so he opens his irritating mouth and threatens to fire the guy from Dragon's Wings if he doesn't become useful. Unfortunately, Kronos' threat proves to be fatal as they echo inside Wimmy's ears countless times and engrave the words, "Get out" and "fired" in the boy's mind. The flashback in the form of a nightmare wakes Wimmy up amidst the deep night, which makes Miss Stalker, who is at her unlawful hobby, again worried as she watches over her friend with a binocular telescope. Fortunately, the grantor had moved into the Nachtlabel's guest house as he is, after all, a provisional member. So Eshan's routine has become easier now compared to when Wimmy was living in the Dragon's Wings, and she's sneaking inside the room to make sure the guy is safe. Little does Marie know that it is she and her stalking tools, such as the tracker crest and eavesdropping stones, who are dangerous for Wimmy in many ways. Moreover, Miss Stalker is already on the 105th volume of her book, Wimmy's Diary, where she is taking notes of the guy's daily activities. Like this morning when Wimmy runs outside the mansion before eating breakfast at Nachtlabel's restaurant, which consists of sausage bacon and steamed potatoes. That afternoon, he practices magic and studies monster biology until night arrives, and Wimmy can finally rest as he doesn't have a ton of tasks, unlike in his days in the Dragon's Wings. Eshan is weirdly yet not surprisingly in the room, however, recording her estimated weight of Wimmy and their conversation early that morning before leaving with satisfaction, happy she's getting closer, literally, to Wimmy again, after all these years. The next morning, Marie can be seen in her study room rather than Wimmy's, but she still monitors the guy's routine thanks to the tracking device she has secretly installed at the grantor, leading Miss Stalker to discover that Wimmy is strangely in their party house's courtyard. She assumes that Abel is the one accompanying the grantor, but this stalker can't afford to be careless, so she activates the eavesdropping stone and hears a woman's voice on the other side of the line, causing Marie to jitter in fear of a thieving cat. In the training grounds, Wimmy faces a woman who turns out to be Camilla and maintains a fair distance for their training session. Eshan, on the other hand, is relieved that the voice is just from their leader and decides to watch their practice, where Camilla seems to be trying a new method using the grantor's enchantment. By applying Wimmy's weaker buffs and moving as fast as she can, while also letting the body learn the movements, Camilla will then reproduce those exact maneuvers with the enchantments released until she gets used to them. Time passes while Marie is watching their training, which leads her to witness the next few moments as Camilla leaps with tremendous power while unsheathing her sword and releasing an undoubtedly powerful slash. While Wimmy is just staring dumbfoundedly at the monstrous display of strength, Marie sweats up in both amazement and intimidation that Camilla has already reproduced the motion of the weakened enchantment within just an hour. The leader seems delighted about it too, but she also thinks that improvement is necessary, which leads Wimmy to voice out his opinions and suggests a way for Camilla to get closer to her ideal result. This time, the grantor uses reverse enhancement to the knocked label's leader instead of the usual buffs. So Camilla tries to recreate the movements once more, causing Wimmy to ask if the party leader is satisfied with it now. In response, Camilla hugs the young boy out of the blue, without warning or anything of the sort, and Marie, aka Miss Stalker, is definitely not pleased by what she'll write in today's stalking expedition diary entry. While the two are in the middle of their embrace, Marie is going out of control as she screams in disagreement regarding Camilla's actions regarding her beloved Wimmy, even though none of those yells will reach those two's ears. Eventually, she calms herself down and thinks that the hug happens only because Camilla is so moved by their training results, but the maiden's face the party leader shows says something else, and Marie can't do anything but come to terms with it. When the embrace ends, Camilla invites Wimmy to join her morning exercises every day and offers payment for his assistance, while in the afternoon, Mark invites the young grantor for a drink. All of these seem natural on the outside, but Marie knows that it's their leader's plan to create personal relationships with Wimmy, to keep his connection with their adventuring party. Regardless, evening greets them in the blink of an eye, and we can see Miss Stalker in her room, talking to herself about the little to no shred of common sense and respect for privacy she has, because this girl is taking a break on her 24/7 unlawful hobby to let the teenage grantor enjoy his nightlife. In the busy district somewhere in Fullbrown, Hans, Noctlabel's vice commander, is starting the cheers to welcome their new provisional member to the party. Inside the pub, however, are waitresses in sailor uniforms entertaining these middle-aged men, while infuriating Eshan, who is at it again despite initially choosing not to creep up on her beloved Wimmy. That same guy seems to enjoy glancing at some thighs, though, so Marie's displeasure just skyrockets, and continues to do so because Miss Stalker here can't properly use her eavesdropping stones. Meanwhile, Hans strikes up a conversation with Wimmy and mentions the rumor that he's from the same city as Marie, which turns out to be true, according to the grantor, who reveals they're both from the faraway town of Riorefelt because he has dreamed of becoming an adventurer in this labyrinthine city for a long time. Hans laughs upon hearing that because he too was reading hero tales, which leads him to this dream job, causing Mark to join their discussion as he mentions hearing from Monica that Wimmy wants to be a mage. Thus, the man concludes that this grantor wishes to be a magician from a fairy tale rather than an epic hero. So Wimmy progresses the conversation into a certain fairy tale whose name he can't remember until Hans tells it to them, hinting that this vice commander is an avid reader. Thanks to that, their conversation heads in a good way with all their laughing and smiling, and Wimmy is definitely enjoying this more than those thighs, making Marie genuinely proud as she ends her stalking spree for tonight. The party eventually ends, and the group is splitting up when Mark suddenly urges Wimmy to come with them, as they are classified as singles among the men, of course, only when you ignore the fact that Mark is a married person. Unfortunately, inviting Wimmy to their next nightlife destination becomes a bad idea when they realize that this grantor already has Marie, so Wimmy clears the misunderstanding by revealing that they're just friends. Furthermore, he tells the two that the sage just feels responsible for taking care of him, so they are quite taken aback by those words, But that will not compare to their shock when the girl in question appears out of thin air right behind them. She surprises the whole crowd of thirsty men by saying that this sudden meeting is all a coincidence, although it's clear as day that it is not, leading her to ask Mark where in the full brown they are planning to bring Wimmy. Afterward, Marie drags her friend out of the company of Mark and the others and heads home with just the two of them, causing the grantor to express how happy he is by all of today's events, which make him feel that Nacht Liebe is welcoming. Wimmy also treats this experience like being in a circle of friends for the first time, to which Miss Stalker replies with a compliment and tells the confused guy that she knows everything about him, as usual. The next day, in the Nacht Liebe leader's office, Dominic makes his appearance once again as an Adventurers Guild investigator, asking for Camilla's assistance for the secret investigation they are conducting. The adventurer immediately asks about the current situation, or rather the topic of the guild's inspection, leading Camilla to learn that this whole thing will be about the former member of the Dragon's Wings, the banished grantor, Wimmy. In a span of a few minutes, Dominic reveals all the details, only for it to get laughed at by Camilla, who can't believe that Wimmy is the one who defeated the 97th Athlor boss, the enormous King Crocodile, all by himself. Even so, Dominic is aware of all evidence regarding the monster's wounds that are caused by a machete, whether Wimmy, the owner, is the one who used it, or Kronos borrowed the weapon. There are possibilities and no flaws in Wimmy's submitted report, but Dominic regrets their disability of conducting an open investigation, claiming it as an incident called the Secrets of the Labyrinth, which, according to Camilla, is a situation where the claims of both parties will be considered as the truth, given that only physical evidence is present, such as the crocodile's wounds. Turns out, this Dominic guy and the Adventurer Guild are delaying the promotion approval of Dragon's Wings to prevent the three who can't even inflict damage on a floor boss from being treated as heroes. Solo defeating a high-level floor boss is also unprecedented, however, so only Dominic believes that Wimmy is the boss exterminator. But the investigator is bothered about the fact that the grantor deliberately doesn't include his own achievements in the report. When she hears that, Camilla agrees specifically to the last part about omitting details, and decides to give their cooperation as she now wants to assess the compatibility of their provisional member. With that said, Camilla dives into the labyrinth with some Nacht Label members, and it goes without saying that Wimmy is coming along in their exploration. In the middle of their march, he casts transmission magic and informs the whole adventuring party about the pitfall trap near them, causing Camilla to change their course to prevent getting caught in danger. It is then revealed that this grantor is already spending a few months in the Nacht Label, and is now used to his role of conducting searches and providing support to both the vanguards and rearguards. Moreover, the group is no longer hiding the teleportation circle due to their trust, and that, for Wimmy, is something that he feels very grateful for. Suddenly, Camilla talks to the grantor via telepathy and asks him to show them his fighting skills, even mentioning the guy's ability to grant enhancement on himself and his history of battling small fry monsters. Wimmy isn't confident, however, so Camilla tells him that she needs to see his fighting prowess for their next massive dive, and that determining the enhancer's capabilities will lessen her worries, or so she says. While this pretense is proving to be effective, Simon reports the golem clay doll he spots, leading Camilla to use the monster for Wimmy's test, while assuring him that Marie and the others will lend a hand after he fights it a left with no other choice. Wimmy prepares himself for the upcoming duel, breathing deeply before the out-of-character glare directed at the gigantic golem, who, for now, isn't paying him any attention yet. But perhaps Marie knows how wimpy her friend is, as she then smacks the guy's back and urges him to go and fight the enemy, assuring Wimmy that nothing serious will happen to his precious life. Thus, the grantor braces himself and grabs the machete before going into an enhancer's special battle stance. The higher-ranking members are watching in the front row seats, but Hans can't help but comment about this impossible task of defeating a clay doll, which even B-ranked warriors will have difficulty dealing with. In response, Camilla talks about Wimmy's enchantments, revealing they are a bunch of weak buffs combined together to make an overall enhancement that is incomparable to any grantors. Camilla believes that their provisional member will do as she expects, but Hans's opinions are unclear at this point, and Wimmy's exam finally starts. Along with that, however, are running thoughts, revealing the rituals of adventurers to obtain a specific profession, which will then force a transformation in their bodies, making them tenfold stronger than ordinary humans. Unfortunately, grantors are an exception to that rule, and their strength boost is much lesser than other jobs. Not to mention that learning enchantment and using it is definitely no joke. Therefore, applying buffs to himself will not make Wimmy as strong as other combatant professions. But this grantor bets on the only possibility that will allow him to take on the suddenly. A stone smash heads into Wimmy at a speed that is basically unexpected for a monster of its size. But the jittering scaredy cat earlier turns into an intimidating grantor as he enhances himself with 2-time physical boosts. Evading the golem's destructive punch with a single leap, Wimmy reveals the omitted details about a grantor enchanting himself, freely applying the buffs without the need for a declaration of approval. On top of that, the enchanter can now adjust the enchantments in real time and puts them twice on any body part, different from when he's applying them on other people, which will make him stronger than run-of-the-mill grantors. Wimmy knows that his mana reserves are not that impressive though, so he is planning to turn this fight into a short-term decisive battle, leading him to pummel different parts of the clay doll quickly, to the point that his figure can't be seen anymore. Even Camilla and Hans seem not to expect this kind of development, and the next they see the grantor is when he's using the pillar as a foothold to commence his next attack, albeit worried that the recoil of the continuous enchantments will be unbearable for his weak body. To his surprise, the kickback is not coming, even though a few seconds have already passed, so Wimmy thinks of many reasons, wondering if he has really improved or the after effects are just delayed. But regardless of the logic behind it, the grantor grants himself a triple boost. Without further delay, Wimmy charges straight at the gigantic clay doll and strikes him away. Although he's still unsuccessful in bringing him down, the grantor continues bulldozing his way to defeat the golem using his notorious machete. After a few more slashes, the short-term decisive battle is nearing its end, as Wimmy finally sees the core of the titanic monster. Thus, he immediately obliterates the clay doll, whose enormous stature falls to the ground. While everyone in the knocked label is speechless as they wait, and only Marie has a proud, delightful smile, Wimmy lands from his mid-air maneuver, with the end result pretty much evident as the golem crumbles now that its core is broken into pieces. Naturally, this bunch of veteran adventurers are so bewildered that even Hans, the vice commander, doesn't catch the whole happenings of the battle. Same to the other members who think that it ends in the blink of an eye, which also means that Wimmy's speed is top-notch and will not pale in comparison to those who are currently the top when it comes to quickness. Speaking of the devil, Wimmer returns and apologizes for taking too long to bring the golem down, only to be told that his words sound sarcastic because the squad is absolutely amazed by his performance. That same shock can also be seen in Camilla, who asks Marie who in the world her friend really is. But Miss Stalker only tells the basic details such as the guy's name, specified job, and that they're from the same hometown, before giving an obvious answer saying he's strong. Eventually, Wimmy runs to his friend to tell her how good he's currently feeling in the latest battle. But this guy's overexcitement makes Camilla compare him to a novice adventurer who just defeated a monster for the very first time, which also leads the party leader to ponder about the crocodile floor boss incident and the strange low self-esteem Wimmy has, despite the possibility that he's the one who defeated that monster. Based on the current situation, Camilla concludes that Wimmy is not intentionally hiding his strength, but that doesn't change the fact that the grantor's inconsistency is still a mystery. The guy's babbles end, however, when Marie informs him that he's getting too excited and it's soaring at an abnormal rate, causing Wimmy to let out intelligible noises in embarrassment. Still, Marie praises her friend for taking down a gigantic clay doll all by himself, so Wimmy hopes that he at least manages to ease his companion's worries even a little bit. The grantor then presents his body ache until he finds out it is non-existent, and there's no such thing as recoil despite using triple boost enchantment earlier. Then, Wimmy tries using magic and learns he still has mana left, which is strange too, and the only plausible reason is that this grantor's strength has improved. Unfortunately, his thoughts are interrupted by the shield unit, who decides to carry the provisional member and throw him in the air to celebrate his great feat, making Miss Stalker happy and proud that everyone is beginning to realize how potent her beloved Wimmy is. A few days later, we are brought to a tower near the courtyard, where Hans sees Monica watching something from the window. In response to his curious question, the mage points toward the training grounds, where Camilla and Abel can be seen engaging in a mock duel, with Wimmy watching from the sidelines. Turns out Monica feels quite impressed at their training, so Hans advises her to join them, only to hear that it's quite a bother for Monica to join such a tiresome exercise. Thus, the story brings us to Nacht Labelle's training grounds, where Camilla ends their morning exercises, while Abel, who is kneeling on the floor, refuses to finish it while he's dissatisfied. Therefore, Camilla reminds him to rest to be in perfect shape for their upcoming and first-ever large-scale exploration of the 98th floor tomorrow. But Wimmy interrupts their conversation by asking their opinions about the enhancements. Their voices overlapping Camilla and Abel praise it, with the former saying it's wonderful, and the latter thinking it's awesome. Furthermore, they express how grateful they are for being able to train with Wimmy while improving to an explosive degree in the process. But the grantor is as humble as always, and tells the two that it is he who's learning a lot from their training sessions. Even so, Camilla will still be very thankful for the grantor's assistance to the point that she can't stop herself from feeling excited to give it her all for tomorrow's dungeon dive, and see the results of her training making the innocent young grantor flustered. In preparation for tomorrow, Camilla advises the two to take a break and invites them to have a meal at a delicious restaurant. But while Abel is raring to go and gobble some meat, the opposite can be seen in the troubled Wimmy, who then informs them about a study session he needs to attend with the reconnaissance team. Fortunately, Camilla understands that it needs to be prioritized rather than their meals, so she lets Wimmy leave the scene and heads to the search unit, while letting out a short chuckle upon getting rejected. Putting that aside, Abel asks Camilla if it's possible to continue their morning training even for a little bit longer, to which the party leader responds with a slightly reluctant yes. When all of that's finished, Camilla walks down the hall of their mansion until she catches sight of her subordinate's study session, where Simon is getting excited while discussing Wimmy's method in using search, which is different yet worthwhile to learn for accuracy improvement purposes. Watching the scene fills Camilla's heart with delight and satisfaction about Wimmy's good influence in making everyone pursue self-progress. Right when she's thinking that, however, Camilla hears someone gossiping about the grantor and calling him creepy. It turns out that some lower-ranking members are wondering why those who are joining the dungeon dive, unlike them, have high opinions of that provisional member. That adventurer eventually stops gossiping after his friend warns him, but he still can't brush away the thought that something weird is happening behind the curtains. Instead of scolding them, Camilla tries to understand this not-so-surprising effect, given that their adventuring party consists of Magic Academy students and elite nobles, so their competition should be fierce, the polar opposite of what the banished grantor experienced, easily joining them without an official evaluation. In the end, Camilla can only hope that their opinions will change during the expedition tomorrow. But while she thinks that, a telepathic message informs her about the arrival of a guild representative, which leads Camilla to give her permission for the man's visit in a voice that the gossiping members can hear. Inside the office, Dominic has just finished reading the report about Wimmy defeating a mud golem all by himself, causing him to ask Camilla about her assessment regarding the banished grantors soloing the crocodile floor boss, only to get a blatant no as a response for Dominic's question. The investigator doesn't want to believe it, however, so Camilla reveals her honest opinions and admits that Wimmy is a strong and quick combatant, as well as a one-of-a-kind grantor, which also means that he possesses skills equal to and not surpassing that of a Nacht Labelle's candidate corps members. But before Dominic gives up on his theory, Camilla reveals that this current situation, as well as her opinions, will change if Wimmy is still hiding his full battle prowess. Dominic's demeanor turns cold after knowing that Wimmy's uniqueness makes that possible, so he gets up, mentioning Nacht Labelle's 98th floor exploration, and asking Camilla to let him know if she discovers Wimmy's hidden abilities during that expedition. At night in the tavern, Marie is gleefully gobbling some meat while talking about how happy she is upon seeing Wimmy's sleeping face again these recent nights. Eschan also reveals the guy's embarrassing sleep talks, but Greta doesn't seem a bit amused by her stalking stories, so Marie will, of course, ask this receptionist, whom she still calls a cowgirl, why her energy is a bit lesser than usual. The one who answers that is a fellow customer, however, who informs the sage about a group of the regulars in this pub that ventured to the 98th floor last week and haven't returned since last week. At this point, Marie is not surprised anymore, because small groups investigating a dungeon floor before a large-scale exploration from parties like Nacht Labelle is commonplace, in spite of the risks attached and the big possibility that they won't come back alive. With that said, Marie reminds them that these kinds of things ought to happen to adventurers, and the only thing they can do is to accept it. Unfortunately, her words fail to comfort Greta, and it is troubling for the sage who resorts to yelling her dissatisfaction while ordering the cowwoman not to be so gloomy as she will treat her with a drink. Of course, this rare occurrence is surprising even for Greta, but Marie is firmly determined to give the girl something, so she savors it till the last flavor and gets a glass of drink almost half her size. Marie immediately stops her from drinking a larger and more expensive, 5 times the price beverage, making the sage infuriated rather than delighted in cheering up an acquaintance. On the other hand, the other customers are tearing up from laughing at Greta's enormous container, contrary to Marie, who suffers from being called by her notorious nickname after a long time. However, Greta is just worried about Miss Stalker, who will join Nacht Labelle's dungeon dive tomorrow, as she then cries and reminds Marie to come back safely and go to the tavern with Wimmy. Once again, Marie is so speechless by the genuine concerns of the cowwoman that she averts eye contact before assuring Greta in an embarrassed, shy manner. On the labyrinth's 98th floor, a small group of adventurers are wandering in the dungeon and are regretting their life decisions, mainly their recklessness to venture into this dangerous level, which forces the party leader to retreat before they end up deeper in the water. Not wasting time, the group heads back to safety, running in the shallow river that devoids any monster whatsoever, until screams suddenly reverberate to signal the disappearance of the 2 adventurers. The commander immediately knows that it is the end for them, and he will be next on the list thanks to the shadow lurking in the water, forcing him into accepting his fate, holding onto a necklace, and apologizing to his daughter, Ilya. Afterward, the adventurer shouts his war cry and provokes the monster to fight, making it too late for him to realize that the sea creature has its mouth wide opened, just waiting for its raw dinner to be crushed. The following day, the Nacht Labelle is doing a march around the labyrinthine city of Full Brown, and the citizens are as much as excited as they cheer on the strongest A-rank party who is on their way for a grand dungeon dive. As Wimmy watches this festival-like commotion, however, he wonders if everyone in the Dragon's Wings is included in the crowd, but instantly regrets thinking about them like comrades, and even worrying if their wounds back then are fully healed because there's no news about them recently. Brushing away those thoughts, Wimmy continues the march as he is now a part of Nacht Labelle and not Dragon's Wings, albeit temporarily. Among the crowd, 2 minor characters are talking about the 122 people participating, consisting of all the adventuring party members. Another citizen then joins their conversation to mention the rumored provisional member of Nacht Labelle, who's also a banished grantor from Dragon's Wings, and tells them how capable this famous boy, whose name is challenging for him to remember, is. Their story ends there, though, as the A-ranked adventuring party begins their dangerous dungeon dive on an uncharted floor where high-level beasts and boss-class monsters are waiting, with a powerful speech by Camilla in front of her subordinates in the hall of the Adventurer Guild. With the Nacht Labelle members all eyes on their leader, Camilla encourages them all to leave their fears behind and use the precious lives they have to protect honor, treasure, and comrades, while making a triumphant return without a single casualty. Yelling their party's name, Camilla finishes the speech, and the Nacht Labelle is filled with vigor and confidence as their roars howl loudly, except the grantor, who is awkward at times like this. Marie cannot help but mention the embarrassing display she's seeing, but these two's light and cheerful mood comes to an end almost immediately, tensed up about the upcoming exploration. Soon after, Nacht Labelle heads to the first floor, proceeds to the shortest and safest route they know, and ultimately reaches the place shredded with mysteries, the 98th floor. In this area where the ceiling is too dark for them to see, Wimmy reviews his current role in this expedition, which is to enhance the units on the front line while assisting in scouting and searching traps as side tasks. The pressure is really getting there, and Abel notices that, but Wimmy seems to be in denial of his nervousness until he throws up from all those anxieties piling up. Desperate, this poor guy tries to calm himself down by dividing his tasks into 2 phases, the movement and combat, but that too is overwhelming that Wimmy mutters them in a whole paragraph with too many sentences. Still, Abel believes that this grantor will not fail no matter what, causing him to put his trust in Wimmy in exchange for the enchanter's faith to also rely on them. Furthermore, Abel declares that he will protect the grantor even against a floor boss, which moves Wimmy emotionally, feeling assured by the words of the warrior, who then realizes he just did something cheesy. But while he's suffering from the aftermath of the embarrassment, Wimmy, on the other hand, is wondering if he's now qualified to call Abel a friend, as they have already spent a reasonable amount of time together in morning training and casual conversations. Therefore, Wimmy gets Abel's attention to invite him to a meal when they return, only to get stopped not just by his stutterings, but also by the voice suddenly echoing in his head, welcoming Wimmy into the labyrinth. The guy yells in surprise, and it turns out he's the only one who heard the message, because Abel is confused about why Wimmy is acting that way. Moreover, it is revealed that the welcome is always ringing every time the Grantor visits the dungeon. But it looks like there's no time to think about that right now, because the two just received an order to form a particular battle formation with the whole forefront team. Eventually, Noct Libel reaches a cave and enters it with the lead of the vanguards, not even bothering to eliminate the low-level monsters who are amicable enough not to block their way. In contrast, the search unit spots the presence of an enemy Hydra, causing Wimmy to assume, thanks to the sea creature and the semi-aquatic monsters, that they may be surrounded by water veins around their location. Therefore, Wimmy asks Bettina to cover the left and front areas while he scouts the right and underground parts, telling them to be careful of the descending path when creating the map. Afterward, the Grantor chants something while manually putting the directions on the map he's building, which takes Abel aback, bewildered by Wimmy's job over performance and the precise details he's putting on that will absolutely double or even triple its selling price. Even with that, however, Wimmy still panics upon a little mistake and ultimately vomits for the second time this day. So Abel hands him a small bag of water and reminds Wimmy to stay hydrated. Suddenly, Hans arrives to inform the two that Camilla is looking for them and urges them to talk about a large haul that they'll eventually reach based on Wimmy's calculations. Noct Libel immediately holds a meeting regarding that and the possibility of a lake and river up ahead due to the scent of water they can smell. With that in mind, Hans wonders if they can replenish their supplies, so Wimmy informs them that a butterfly that only grows in clean water can be seen nearby, so they should be fine in that area. Thus, to end the meeting, Camilla asks if there's still something they want to add, and Wimmy seems to do exactly that, though he's too nervous to open his mouth. So Abel and Camilla put pressure on the Grantor, where the latter even starts a countdown. Finally, Wimmy informs them about the odd style of the slope that is strangely turning from downhill to uphill, meaning that they might have been lured to a water trap, or rocks may come rolling down to crush them. Either way leads to their end. On top of that, Wimmy fears that the uphill direction will continue, and the rear will be wholly submerged in the good chance that water may rain down, along with the floor boss, who'll use that to its advantage. Silence envelops the meeting, however, so the boy whose confidence is almost non-existent apologizes for his report and assures them that it's all what-ifs. Of course, Camilla is quite displeased, not because of the unsure assumptions, but due to the Grantor's lack of confidence, causing her to remind Wimmy not to hold back in saying his introspections and tell the guy that he's allowed to live life however he likes. Those words hit pretty hard on Wimmy's mentality in a good way, which leads him to thank Camilla. Afterward, the expedition continues without a hitch, and the group discovers numerous gold veins, securing their profits for this whole dungeon dive. However, their smooth sailing feels too strange for Wimmy, who starts to suspect that the labyrinth is luring them in, but as usual is too anxious to say it to the party. Fortunately, Camilla takes a moment to discuss their next plans, as they have already produced significant results, even though their dive is still a week long. Therefore, she decides to march on, despite the concerns about the slope to which Simon and Mark agree, for the sake of their party's reputation, and the prevention of the so-called dark maps from sprouting. Known as Fullbrown's dark side, those illegal maps are formed by sending adventurers to dangerous territories and forcing them to send information outside via transmission magic to create maps until their lives come to an end. To prevent that from happening, Camilla refuses to leave their investigation incomplete and decides to form a small advance team to minimize the risks. Wimmy agrees that it's the best course of action due to the underlying dangers, so he then wonders who the lucky adventurers will be, assuming it'll consist of Noct Libel's top elites. Without further delay, Camilla announces the final 6 who will be formed: Hans, Abel, Monica, Bettina, Miss Stalker, and Wimmy. The last member proves to be a surprise for the guy himself, and he immediately asks Marie why his name is included on the list. Even now, Wimmy is panicking like crazy, but he can do nothing to stop the leader's decision, and this Grantor will, once again, throw up while wondering what to do. After all, their important yet dangerous mission of securing a water source for this large-scale investigation should be handed to known veterans, and definitely not to an overly anxious Grantor who might be up to the task after all of what's said. No questions asked, and Wimmy immediately enchants the five with physical buffs, which is fortunately to their liking too, especially Abel, who just suppresses the urge to grin ear to ear. Even Monica is jumping for joy, so Wimmy reveals the speed buffs he put on them, and that's only the start of more boosts that are also becoming the flowery romance, because this girl mage is getting way too close with the protagonist. It goes without saying that Marie sinks the ship before it can even sail by going between the two, making Monica pout in displeasure while calling Marie with a cutesy honorific that S-chan doesn't like, along with the fact that this mage is acting chummy with his beloved Wimmy. Thus, Monica talks about how she treats Marie as a friend, but her chest is so unfriendly to Marie that she gives the girl a fitting nickname, Cowwoman B. Eventually, Hans intervenes for the peace of their team, but they go on with their argument, so they discuss their route in Bettina's lead, while Wimmy is also asked by Hans to aid support if he still has the room to do so. Unfortunately, the Grantor vomits as a response to the request, leading Hans to realize that he's basically babysitting kids, given that he's the oldest among them. In a route full of erupting volcanoes, Hans is leading the way to their quick sprint toward the predicted hall, feeling he's in perfect shape thanks to Wimmy's enhancement, and that they can reach the destination sooner than expected. However, Bettina suddenly tells him to change course, not because of a monster, but due to a trap she has found. Turns out, Noctlabelle's improved trap spotting method is one they have improvised thanks to the mountain of data Wimmy gives free of charge. Among the contents are new trap types theory, as well as trends and patterns, which are being put to good use even now when they see a salamander blocking their way. It's not a threat, however, as Hans instantly draws his blade and charges straight at the monster to obliterate it with a few clean slashes. Unfortunately, the salamander's scales are too tough for Hans to destroy, so the battle still continues, this time with Monica's magical spell. She starts charging the magic power and glances at the Grantor to tell him about the enchantment, which leads Wimmy to have Monica keep the attack on hold for the time being. Without second thoughts, the mage does as the Grantor requests and declares her approval of the enchantment, allowing the string of boosts to get attached in the bunch of smiling supernatural sparks, ultimately granting them speed reduction and range adjustment before finalizing the Grantor's enhancement. There's no further delay, as Monica releases the electric shots she's been holding on for a while and sends them straight to the injured salamander, hitting the beast with each of her attacks. Due to Monica's surprise, Wimmy explains casually what he just did, and tells Hans that enchanting weapons are also possible with his abilities. Therefore, the Vice Commander approves the enhancement technique of the Grantor, and takes his turn once more, this time with a boosted blade emitting a light that screams its strength. Standing before the enormous beast, Hans leaps and slashes the monster using his unique swordsman skill, Najagiri, finally defeating the beast, but also baffling the Vice Commander as he lands from the mid-air movement, unable to say a word. Dumbfounded, Hans stares at his sword, amazed by the otherworldly sharpness, which forces him to realize why Camilla likes Wimmy's enchantment in the first place. However, the danger still lingers as Bettina hurriedly informs them of a sea dragon lurking above and is very close to devouring Monica and Wimmy. The enchanter immediately boosts his strength 3 times and jumps toward the sea creature before Monica can even cast her spell, utilizing the machete's sharpness to bring down the gigantic seafood. Because everyone is impressed, they praise Wimmy for his achievement, only to hear from the humble yet ignorant boy that it's just a small fry for him. Of course, hearing those words will make Hans wonder if the new species of labyrinth water dragon is really a weakling like Wimmy says. Putting that aside, Hans sees an image pendant from the monster's mouth that seems to be from a deceased adventurer, causing him to urge the start of prayer to pay respect to those who pass away. Wimmy, on the other hand, is thinking about how fortunate he is that their group cooperation is going smoothly so far, a thing that he didn't achieve in his days in the dragon's wings. After the silent prayers, the advance team forges ahead with their mission by going through narrow spaces until they finally reach the vast hall, a wide area abundant in nothing but large boulders, with air creatures flying here and there. Just like they predicted, the Great Hall consists of a lake that has a water quality suitable for drinking, so Hans praises Wimmy for finding this place through search, as it'll be valuable for the party. Abel does the same, and commends the Grantor with a job well done, only to receive an overly modest reply from the Grantor, who eventually gets scolded by his stalker of a friend, who advises Wimmy to just take the compliment without engaging in another session of self-deprecation. To defend himself, Wimmy makes it clear that putting himself down is by no means enjoyable. But Marie knows that this guy is thinking that he's abusing her authority while tarnishing the adventuring party just by being at Noct Label. That hits right on the mark, but fortunately, Abel is there to ease Wimmy's worries with a handshake and a single thank you, making Miss Stalker proud as she watches her secret crush making a new male friend. A few minutes after that, the area's safety is confirmed, so the main force reunites with the advance team, allowing Camilla to verify that the place is appropriate to be their water source. So she will, of course, praise the whole squad. With that said, Noct Label designates the place as a relay point and packs their things, as it will also be their base for tonight. Even though it's that time of the day to rest, Wimmy refuses to sleep and decides to analyze the data and records about today's exploration first. There, he reviews the weird slope earlier, along with the Great Hall, which seems to be a wasteland with a ceiling that stretches endlessly. In the end, Wimmy still worries about being submerged in the off chance that a large amount of water floods their night base, so he racks his brain for a potential escape path to prepare for the worst situation, and concludes that he just doesn't have an idea on what to do when that happens. After all of that overthinking and worrying, Wimmy resigns and heads to sleep, especially after remembering that there are no water-related traps that will flood them in the first place. While all are asleep, however, rainfall pours down on the adventurers, including Wimmy, who eventually wakes up only to see the unforeseen predicament, the rain that is getting more intense every second. With all the panicking and yelling, Wimmy laments how unexpected this grave situation is for him. Due to the strong rainfall, Noct Label is in a state of confusion as they desperately think about what in the world is happening that even the cautious Wimmy, who fails to predict and prepare for this kind of situation, is having his composure crushed, as he then learns that this continuous downpour affects their visibility in the worst way possible. On the other hand, the warriors find out that their escape route is unavailable to use thanks to the water flooding their path, pushing them away with its current. They immediately report this to the party leader, who tells them to calm down, and then yells about their grave problem of having no way to escape from this labyrinth floor, whose boss may come at any second and turn the situation from worse to worse. However, that roar is devoid of despair, and Camille urges her subordinates instead to brace themselves and prove their worth, turning the speechless and panicking adventurers into calm and cheerful high-morale warriors. This amazes the dumbfounded Wimmy, and he, along with Marie, joins their crusade against the absurdity of the dungeon, assessing the situation on all sides and looking for anomalies to report to each other. Fortunately, there's no monster sighting so far, but that ends when Bettina senses something on her radar and informs the party about an approaching creature in the North Passage. She also reveals the possibility of it becoming the floor boss, so Camilla gives the rear guards an order to shoot after Wimmy's enchantment, which they unquestionably do, chanting their spells until the grantor grants them enhancements, hardening and vibration allowing the magicians to shoot the unknown creature, whose enormous tentacles appear thanks to the mage's efforts. Unfortunately, that's not enough to bring the monster down, or to at least see its whole figure, so Camilla asks the mages to release a more powerful attack, leading Wimmy to improve the enchantments for each of the rear guards to boost the joint thunderstorm spear. The magicians, the hardened, pointy weapon quickly pierces the notorious tentacles, creating a destructive collision that causes the tentacles to vanish in a split second. It doesn't seem to be the end, however, as Bettina reports to them about the signs of life of not just one, but countless tentacles of the yet-to-be-revealed creature. The counterattack instantly arrives, so the shield squad hurriedly forms a formation and blocks the whips with a reflected barrier enchanted by Wimmy. Thanks to that, the good old Mark is getting fired up, so the offensive operation continues, this time with Marie illuminating the target with a blinding flash, which enables the Noct Label and its leader to witness the monster's true form, an unexpectedly enormous sea creature much larger than anything they have fought so far. In the presence of the labyrinth beast, Noct Label adventurers can only show a wry smile, while Wimmy, on the other hand, tells Camilla his opinions that this adversary, whom he refers to as a sea cow, doesn't resemble the floor masters he has encountered so far, even though it is most likely 98 the floor boss. Camilla devises a plan to make use of fire magic, assuming it'll be effective, so the magicians do as their leader says and cast each of their own scorching flames, ultimately sending it to the gigantic sea cow's way. Hearing the creature's scream lights hope for Noct Label, and Camilla won't let this opportunity go to waste, as she then gives precise commands for each of the squads to go on to a defensive and offensive spree. While the adventurers are gung-ho on obeying those orders, Camilla gives another and tells Wimmy to focus the enchantments on the shield unit. Therefore, Abel and Mark are brimming with vigor to show off what they have with the provisional grantor on their side. From there on, it turns into smooth sailing for the combatants of the Noct Label, who resort to a hit-and-run strategy for the duration of the battle, slowly but surely wearing down the gigantic floormaster. Like watching a chess match, this calculated battle between the adventurers and the sea creature that the latter reigns despite being in the enemy territory is so amazing for Wimmy that he becomes overly impressed at the full potential of the strongest A-ranked party. Suddenly, Camilla calls Wimmy's name, unsheathing her sword before asking the grantor to go all out and put enchantments on her. The smile of the party leader saying, "I'm counting on you," gives confidence to the enchanter, allowing Camilla to declare her approval to Wimmy's buffs while walking toward the adversary. Immediately, the subordinates make way for their leader to approach the floor boss without interruptions. So Wimmy enhances Camilla's physical prowess by granting boosts. It is not just the body, but also the weapon of Noct Label's leader that is enchanted enough for everyone to hurry and fall back, so as not to interfere with their captain. Finally, Camilla arrives at where the monster lies and faces him one-on-one, while Wimmy is watching on the sidelines, prepared to witness the commander's absolute stop. Planning to end the combat with a single strike to prevent the dungeon boss from showing his hidden trump card, Camilla smiles in exhilaration to test the results of all those morning training sessions in real battle at long last. The battle is interrupted by a flashback going back to a few years ago, where we can see Camilla in the courtyard struggling to train and reach greater heights. Unfortunately, her magic mastery and physical skill level are already too high to begin with, and the training eventually comes to the point where Camilla's strength gives up, as she lies her exhausted body on the floor after swinging the heavy weapon 1,022 times. In spite of that great amount, Camilla fills herself with frustration because there's no progress in her physical training anymore, forcing the leader to accept the harsh reality that she should focus on giving orders as the commander instead. With that, the story returns to the present, when Camilla is still walking toward the enemy alone, while contemplating the effects of the enchantment repetition training with Wimmy, which ultimately gives this adventurer hope that she hasn't reached her limits after all. Camilla smiles, feeling grateful to Wimmy, who is the main reason for her exponential battle growth, and realizes just now that their first battle experience together is the trigger of the revival of her exhilaration as a warrior. Without further delay, Camilla activates the giant hunter, turning the not-so-large magical blade into a light sword larger than the size of the enemy monster. Moreover, according to Hans, Camilla's ability won't be restricted thanks to the endless sky in this deep part of the dungeon, and that premonition is turning into truth, as the giant hunter can be seen stretching in the pitch-black, non-existent roof, while Camilla is maintaining her battle stance mid-air, prepared to release the large swing of the gigantic magical sword. After all, this commander finally senses the lightness of her physique, as she then shows a blushingly satisfied smile due to the blissful physical state where she can strike with all her might. Unfortunately, that also means that the adventurers need to run as far as they can, because there's no holding back for their leader, who faces the sea creature's tentacles head-on. In response to the monster's desperate efforts, Camilla mercilessly showcases the infamous ability of the giant hunter and splits the colossal sea creature's body in half with a single yet overpowered slash. It goes without saying that the impact of the 100% sword swing makes a mess out of the floor boss and utterly divides him into two, with the other half eventually falling to the ground. As they witness Camilla's utter stomp, the adventurers of Noct Label yell in celebration of their complete victory, but that won't last long, as Wimmy senses a lingering danger for their party. Simon, who also notices the same thing, reports that there's still a biological response from the sea cow, despite it's not in its complete form anymore, so Camilla rushes to do the countermeasure, and so are Marie and other combatants, who shower the floor boss with continuous magic spells. After a few more shots and chants, Simon announces their triumph against the floor master, and the adventurers will once again roar a louder cry of victory, because they just defeated a high-level dungeon boss in just their first dive, an unprecedented event that is worthy of being a historical moment, not just for Noct Label. But while they are celebrating at their heart's content, Wimmy doesn't have an inch of happiness in his face, and is instead doubting that the boss battle is over. Eventually, he contemplates how easy it is for them to beat the monster, which is strange considering that they're on the 98th floor, until Wimmy just forces himself to believe that Noct Label is strong enough to pull it off. Abel then runs toward the grantor, so Wimmy turns to meet him until he goes out of balance due to the rising water level. Turns out, This small incident leads Wimmy to realize that the rain that is still not disappearing despite the defeat of the Floor Master is too suspicious. However, Wimmy decides not to jump to baseless conclusions and proceeds to contact Camilla instead, informing her about the current advantage of semi-aquatic monsters in the area due to the rising water level thanks to the rain, which, on the one hand, is decreasing their speed. Therefore, Camilla apologizes for carelessly celebrating in the middle of an underlying risk and is now planning for them to retreat by asking the grantor if he has an escape plan devised. Fortunately, Wimmy has something in mind, so he informs the leader about the difficult, time-consuming, but worthy-to-try method, only to come face-to-face with fear as he realizes that his body is trembling for unknown reasons. The mystery will be revealed quicker than he expects, though, when another creature splashes out of the water and takes them by surprise. Along with that is a large rumble somewhere, and the adventurers of Noctlabel still have entirely no idea what it is until they see a creature emitting a black mist, causing them to turn around and catch sight of a gigantic sea monster, a creature similar to the one they fought earlier, but is more colossus, and not to mention terrifying than that deceased mob. Everyone instantly realizes the nightmare awaiting them, and they can only stare in despair at the titanic aquatic beast, which the adventuring party thinks is the real Floor Master. However, that thought is also dismissed by a series of thunderous rumbles echoing, and the appearance of more gigantic sea creatures that are the same, if not stronger, than the second sea cow who arrives. Once again, despair envelops the adventurers of Noctlabel, including the grantor, who looks clearly devastated, contrary to their leader, who still has the will to fight despite all of these not-so-desirable revelations on the 98th floor. In addition, the black smoke worsens the fear of the adventurers, who, at this critical time, are oblivious of what to do to win, escape, or live in the presence of their fearsome adversaries, who are giving them no chance of winning. That much is evident even for Simon, who assumes that rain is one of their enemy's abilities, as it is making it hard for him to see or hear clearly and accurately analyze the whole area. With their desperate efforts, Noctlabel members discover that there are 2 colossal monsters on each of the east and west sides, while the southern part, on the other hand, has a total of 5 lurking beasts. As he listens to the ongoing reports saying that they're surrounded on all sides, Wimmy's mind is undergoing chaos, the same as their dire situation where almost everyone is panicking. Amidst all of that, Camilla still has her composure as she orders the whole party to gather and form a defensive position, leading Wimmy to regain his calmness, and he hurries to obey the command of his leader. Thankfully, the shield unit makes it in time to surround the whole team and defend them from the incoming attacks of the absurd-level monsters. Still, it doesn't change the fact that they have little to no power to fight back, and the grantor is aware of that because he's just looking down and wondering if they can really push through against the floor boss and its intimidatingly large subordinates. Thus, the guy receives a smack in the back from Mark, who tells him not to look down and instead glance around the faces of their companions. Wimmy finds out that everyone is still willing to fight to survive, and he's the only one panicking this time around. Finally, the grantor gains the motivation to look ahead, reflecting on his actions, and comes to think that they have the power and strength needed to turn the situation around and make it back alive. Therefore, Wimmy assesses everything on the battlefield and ponders a way to execute the methods he can do to help, in spite of the threatening tentacles coming their way. Immediately after seeing the incoming attack, Camilla urges her subordinates to defend, as they still have the morale to do so, despite the all-tentacle joint offensive of those sea monsters. Wimmy spares no time in enchanting the shield unit with protective buffs, allowing Abel and his teammates to yell and endure in unison while listening to Camilla's plan to commence a counterattack to the real floor boss upon the successful defense. However, the great numbers of the pitch-black tentacles are too overwhelming after all, that some members are beginning to cower in fear, even though they can't do anything now except to listen to the desperate yet mighty roar of their leader, right before those life-ending and countless limbs come raining down on them. Fortunately, the adventurers of the Noctlabel manage to stand their ground against the fierce strikes from the sea creatures. But that doesn't last long because, one by one, the people around Wimmy fail to endure the endless tentacle whips. As the one-sided stomp goes on, the grantor is the only one near his area who continues to handle the excruciating pain until Camilla's voice, encouraging them to put up with the attacks, fortunately, raises Wimmy and everyone's spirit. Or so they thought as the nightmare ends, with the adventuring party of Noctlabel partially annihilated. As the story continues, most of the adventurers are now lying on the ground, and even though the tentacle whips that seem to last forever ends, only the higher-leveled warriors are still standing to face their adversary. However, this scenario, no matter how worse it is, is still within Wimi's expectations, as he and the party know the irrationality of the labyrinth, where returning with everyone is absolutely out of the question, no matter how much they prepare for it. Furthermore, it is given that adventuring parties who are first to dive into a dungeon floor will face expected tragic results. But because Wimi is just a provisional member, Camilla advises him to escape alone, assuming everyone will understand the Grantor's circumstances. With that said, Camilla asks for a favor, telling the reluctant Wimi that they can't possibly escape with everyone now, and orders the Grantor to give her all the enhancements he can so she can defeat the monster. Wimi knows what his leader is thinking, which proves to be right when Camilla issues the command, form squads of 3 and disperse when the opportunity comes, while Wimi leads them to the escape route when he finds some leeway on his hands. Unfortunately, the Grantor's refusal won't be heard this time, as Camilla is determined to take responsibility for the lives of her subordinates. Hearing his leader talk about a future where she doesn't exist, and only the young talents such as Marie, Abel, and even him running Noct Label saddens Wimi. But perhaps he can do nothing now but accept Camilla's declaration of approval to his enchantment. With a bitterly sorrowful face, the Grantor faces his inner dilemma and ultimately gives buffs to the party leader, despite how much he hates to resign to such conditions. Brimming with the enhancements from the Grantor, Camilla activates the transmission magic and informs the whole adventuring party of her order, which may possibly also be this Nidus's final words. Without further ado, Camilla tells the adventurers to form groups of 3 after helping the wounded, and immediately escape when the time comes. She then thanks everyone for everything, yet they don't even want to reply "you're welcome" to their party leader, who is basically saying goodbye. After all, it's impossible to say those words to their precious comrade, who eventually cuts the communication channel between her and the adventurers. After a long, deep breath, Camilla feels a strange load off her shoulders, followed by the bravery to face the gigantic floor boss, no matter how hopeless their grave situation currently is. Therefore, she introduces herself to the monster like a noble knight, acknowledging him as the floor master, and, with all due respect, swears to bring him down. The aquatic beast seems to understand the leader's hostility, and rains the tentacles, allowing Camilla to leap above to execute her own attack, slashing through the hindrances to make her way toward the baffled sea beast and charging the power of the giant hunter. In a matter of seconds, the magic sword enlarges and changes its shape to something else before cutting down the next batch of the notorious anime tentacles coming from the floor master, who doesn't seem to faze, albeit facing the powerful adventurer. Camilla complains about the continuous attacks she receives, but this too is something not rare in anime and manga battles, as she, in fact, finishes the shape-shifting of Giant Hunter that ultimately becomes a Reaper Scythe. With this weapon, the Nidus slices the large tentacle in half and charges toward the floor boss, eliminating the obstacles easier than when she's using the sword. As the exchanges of blows go on, Camilla feels her body strangely becoming lighter, and this adventuring party leader starts to ignore the fatigue, sensing strength that causes her to think and shout, "Is it really me now?" Yeah, I think the next event answers that question as Camilla reaps the tentacles using her enormous scythe, which makes the monster finally shriek in pain, contrary to the party leader, who is grinning in excitement upon thinking that she can now fight the floor boss on equal terms. The next moments become clear in Camilla's mind, as the Nidus imagines her next moves while swinging the blade, thirsty to inflict more wounds on the sea beast. Meanwhile, Wimi watches the fierce battle from the ground and feels quite amazed at the prowess of his leader, even comparing it to a duel between a mythical hero and a fearsome monster. This is also as expected, but this grand tour is still mentally troubled by Camilla's orders, although he then runs not to waste the stalled time and prepares himself to escape with the adventurers while abandoning the night. Somewhere on the battlefield, Marie is healing Mark's wounds when Wimi eventually arrives at her location, where he then finds out that almost everyone there is safe from the monster's attack. Marie informs him that Hans is also fine, but that doesn't seem to be the case at the reconnaissance team too, which leads the sage to urge Wimi to leave with her. With a sorrowful yes, the grand tour follows Marie, but he stops his feet after walking just a few steps, unable to go on any further. Question marks appear on Marie's head as she wonders why her friend and stalking target suddenly halts. Unfortunately, Eshan has no notorious spying tool to know what is inside Wimi's mind, so she's not aware that the Grand Tour is once again being hunted by the words and insults of his former leader from the Dragon's Wings, Kronos, telling him he's useless. The sensation he feels when hearing those from the narcissistic typical snob is the same as what Wimi is feeling right now. Worried, Marie repeatedly calls the Grand Tour's name, but the boy is too preoccupied thinking about his interactions with Camilla that he can't shake these thoughts. making it more difficult for Wimmy to move on with their leader's orders. Eventually, more memories pop into the Grand Tour's head, yet there's no time for shipping jokes from the writer as Wimmy's dilemma is more important to focus on. Our boy forces himself to concentrate and continue the retreat mission, but even moving his feet seems to be a difficult task for this Grand Tour. In the middle of his mental hardships, it is Miss Stalker who wakes him up with a shoulder grab and a "look at me dumb," ultimately describing what his face looks like right now. Frozen in place, Wimmy smirks in fear, which according to Marie is the same expression he has when being humiliated by the quote-unquote trash, which obviously refers to Kronos. Is there anyone else besides him? Enraged, Marie tells Wimmy not to run away and think things through instead, confusing the Grand Tour as to what on earth this stalker is stalking about. Although it turns out that S-chan is the one who has a point right now, as she confirms that Wimmy is doubting. In fact, the melancholic Grand Tour can't say a word upon hearing that harsh reality. But while they're exchanging words, it is the blows and slashes that are being traded on the battlefield where Camilla is revealed to possess the absolute upper hand as she continues decreasing the monster's body parts. Therefore, the adventurers of Nacht Label regain their morale, hoping they can reign victorious in this fight for survival with the help of their leader. To answer those cries of hope, Camilla slices the tentacles using the magical Reaper, slashing and maneuvering midair until she notices that the sea creature's attack finally stops. The party leader sees this as a perfect opportunity to stop defending and strike back, turning Giant Hunter into a sword once more, and a much larger and obviously more powerful one at that. With everything she has, Camilla swings the gigantic blade at the Floormaster, activating the human hunt skill at the aquatic beast, ultimately delivering the final blow and stealing the victory. Or so you and they thought until a speech bubble appeared on the boss's head, saying good while dodging the life-ending slash from Camilla. It is not just the leader of Nacht Label who feels shocked, although she's the most and one can't deny that, but also her subordinates who gasp in fear while watching Camilla receive a direct hit from the Floormaster's large tentacles. The figure of the party leader getting struck away can be seen by all the adventurers, including Wimmy and Marie, of course, where the former immediately activates an enchantment on himself and rushes toward Camilla, who is close to falling on the floor. He instantly signals Abel to help them, which he understands, allowing Wimmy to focus on saving their party leader from the dangerous fall. As soon as he catches her, the Grand Tour hurriedly checks if Camilla is conscious, but behind them are the tentacles of the Floormaster that follow the knight to ensure she meets the underworld. Fortunately, Abel makes it in time and shields the two from the threat using the reflecting barrier, assuring the Grand Tour to let him handle the defense. Camilla then wakes up after coughing due to the severe damage in her body, which is revealed to be broken bones and organs, but thankfully she's still conscious after all of that, and even has the strength to ask who is left in the dungeon floor. Thus, Wimmy informs her that they failed to escape, but given that no one has actually perished, the Grand Tour urges the leader to retreat with everyone together. Camilla doesn't want to, however, and advises him to leave her instead. She then gets up despite the severe injuries, and reassures the enchanter that she can at least act as a meat barrier for them. It goes without saying that Wimmy disagrees with that proposal, and the adventurers of Nacht Label aren't giving up in the first place. So Camilla maintains her fighting will and declares her approval to be bestowed by enchantments. There's no time to hesitate for Wimmy, but he's already aware of it, as well as the undeniable fact that sacrificing others won't surely cut it. Besides, it is these people who accepted him, even though it's not uncommon that this Grand Tour doesn't fit in a good adventuring party. He deepens his thoughts and shows a glare unbefitting his usual wimpy demeanor, thinking about how not normal he is based on the standard norms, which actually makes Wimmy someone deserving to be banished. Okay, I know you disagree, but it is all for the Grand Tour to conclude that everyone in Full Brown City, including Nacht Label, must be protected. Although I'm 100% sure Dragon's Wings shouldn't be on that list. Still, Wimmy desires to pay back the kindness of Camilla and the others, so he uses the transmission magic and apologizes to everyone, informing them that he will disobey their leader's orders. Even Abel, who's just near him, can't believe what he's hearing, but Wimmy is firmly determined to continue the best option he can think of right now, to beat the Floormaster while giving his companions the time to execute their retreat. Therefore, Camilla asks what in the world is happening, though Wimmy just switches places with her in a sense. Fortunately, the knight's question is answered by the activation of the debuff that steals her enhanced strength. Once again, Wimmy declares that he will defeat the dungeon floor boss, making Camilla conclude that this Grand Tour is really hiding something up his sleeve. She's completely right, as Wimmy then forms his to-be signature hand signal and smiles upon remembering Marie and Camilla's advice to live his life how he wants. There's no more delay, And finally, Wimmy transitions to the skill of Puppet Master. Camilla asks once more what he is doing, but it is pure confusion that the Grantor, who faces the Floor Master and the other not-so-small fries, replies with a statement filled with the responsibility to defeat their adversary. In the raining battlefield where Wimmy approaches the boss, Marie interrupts not to stop him, but to see her friend off with a smile. Same with the Grantor, who's already bidding Miss Stalker goodbye. Marie thinks that Wimmy will win, though, yet the guy's lack of self-confidence surfaces. Or not, because the Grantor thinks he's much stronger than the boss of the previous floor, which is, by the way, the infamous Croco, if you happen to forget. I hope you're not. Anyway, Wimmy realizes that he's overly excited and assumes it must be because the situation is so fearsome that he begins to tremble at the thought of having his life at stake. In contrast, Marie thinks that there isn't a pinch of fear visible in her friend, and the sage begins to contemplate that she knows Wimmy more than he is aware of himself. Even so, Miss Stalker believes that the day will come when the situation reverses, and the things she's unaware of will be answered by none other than Wimmy. One of those plethoras of questions, however, is regarding why the Grantor is still laughing amidst their situation, along with the rain dance that should be from a different pocket. And Monsters Anime is the regeneration of the water-type Floor Master's tentacles that renders Camilla's efforts to cut them down all useless. Full potion? Okay, they don't exist in this manga. Still, it looks like not just the viewers, but also the adventurers of Noctli Bell don't appreciate the joke, as well as the current state of things where the water level has risen considerably. Wimmy is walking down that very path, aware that he needs to resolve their problem quickly, or it will be more difficult for them as time passes. Finally, he reaches the Floor Master, who strangely didn't attack him on his way, even though it can surely bypass the plot hole. Well, thanks to that, Wimmy closes their distance safely as he clenches his fist, raring to try his best and defeat the dungeon boss. Before that, the Grantor explains his ability as an enchanter, revealing that he can reinforce different parts of the human body, which is a great shocker actually. Yeah, as if. However, the real deal comes next, as it turns out that physically enhancing the bones and muscles of someone is just the easiest and the first level of the process. Meanwhile, at levels 4, 5 is the more complex yet powerful heart strengthening that is revealed to be an invisible realm, performed by only a few sorcerers. What goes even further than that, however, is the absurdly high difficulty of enhancing the brain, a forbidden technique that has an unknown number of levels. Oh, and also it seems like we won't have your most awaited battle soon, at least for a few minutes, as we will embark on a short flashback first. Wimmy is in his room studying brain strengthening only to get stuck after learning that there's a scarcity of descriptions about the said technique and no success recorded among all 3 attempts based on history. However, this Grantor knows that the enormous leap of combat ability it can provide is bound with a tremendous degree of danger, not to mention that it's basically impossible to strengthen another's brain, and a non-combatant Grantor doing it on him or herself is practically useless. He's complaining about the lack of volunteers for this dangerous experiment, even though it's natural that no one will risk their lives for this, leading his thoughts to wander and remember the time when Kronos tells him to back off in a certain battle in the dungeon, emphasizing the uselessness of the enchanter. Tempted with the desire to gain strength, Wimmy does the unthinkable and activates his first ever Puppet Master on the brain, increasing its processing speed in a frightening number as the scene then returns to the present, showing the same situation when Wimmy activates the ability and the recent events of his days in Noctli Bell rolls in his mind like a film. The surge of information brings excruciating pain, and he's running the risk of falling unconscious, as well as the overload of data inside his head, which forces Wimmy to become aware of his consciousness to surpass the dangers. By repeating questions and answers to himself, tuning his senses, and adjusting the multipliers at the right limit, Wimmy conquers the overburden by setting the number to 1.00001 times. With this, the Grantor will suffer brain damage in the worst-case scenario. Yet it is more than enough to make the mind acceleration that is supposed to be impossible feasible. For the second time this day, the Floor Master flinches in fear, this time after seeing the Puppet Master who runs toward him with a creepy demonic laugh, gripping the machete firmly to bring down the notorious tentacles of the Floor Master that come raining down on him for how many times today. Unfortunately, the lower-level aquatic monsters also join the fray. And I don't know about you, but I think one of them is smirking at our protagonist. No, don't think about her that way. That beast won't turn into an aquatic Nekomimi anytime soon. Putting those impure wishes aside, the attacks of the Floor Master quickly approach, but all Wimmy can think of is the question as to whether he has already perished. After all, the landscape feels somehow slow for this enchanted Grantor, who easily evades the tentacles as if they are nothing, casually entering the field of range of the sea creature. He catches sight of those threats shifting their direction as if following him, so Wimmy dodges the series of thrusts and makes them footholds for further evasions. The action just won't take a rest, as the puppet master then sprints using the large tentacle, all eyes wide open, while making his way at the floor boss, who showers him with life-ending blows. Immediately, Wimmy jumps to prevent them from hitting him, and instead forces the monster to self-inflict damage on his body. Of course, seeing this out-of-the-world duel bewilders the adventurers of Noct Label, as they simply watch the unprecedented movements of their provisional member, which is much more surprising than the one they saw in Camilla's fight. Eventually, Wimmy lands on a tentacle that looks more like a branch of the divine tree somewhere, and it seems like he's getting tired of mostly evading as the Grantor then strengthens his speed by 20 times. All of a sudden, his view of the surroundings turns dizzyingly weird, but that is purely because Wimmy accelerates his mind and body in an absurd amount of multipliers that are not humane, no matter how you look at it. However, thanks to that, Wimmy's speed increases, allowing him to see the optical method and understand the perfect timing of each and every maneuver. Thinking that he's still weak compared to others, Wimmy bets on the 1 in 100,000th chance not to achieve success, but to make it happen as he once again leaps toward the enemy. Unfortunately, the situation remains almost the same in terms of outcome, and Wimmy still continues dodging the upcoming fierce blows, strengthening the elasticity of his ligaments, which allows him to land a strike while preventing close contact with the tentacles. That is just the start, however, as more limbs go straight at the Grantor, who still laughs amidst the life-ending danger and spins his body, looking for that miracle that will turn the situation around. Using the impact of a machete strike, Wimmy cancels the momentum of his jump and successfully escapes from having a one-way ticket to the afterlife while laughing in excitement. Meanwhile, Marie is treating Camilla's wounds with magic, but the party leader is clearly distracted in watching the fierce battle, although she's baffled at the otherworldly movements of the Grantor. Thus, Marie explains to the best of her ability the dangerous moves Wimmy just made, which leads Camilla to think that it's not in any way the movement of a human. On the other hand, witnessing the battle of her friend and, yes, stalking target, Marie yells the words, "Live as you want," toward the grinning Wimmy. It is unclear if the Grantor hears the motivational quote from the young sage, but it is evident that he's getting exhilarated after seeing an example of one out of many miracles. Despite that, Wimmy knows that this is far from enough and he might get obliterated, ultimately receiving a merciless punishment even with just one mistake. Strange enough, the puppet master still has his creepy yet hair-raising smile, confident that he is superior when it comes to speed. To his surprise, however, the floor master creates a magic circle, and without even chanting, it lets out a magical spell, a wave that is too quick for the Grantor to survive. However, the smiling puppet master is already aware of that, and he moves his feet to avoid the attack, which leads the monster to slice its own tentacles instead. Wimmy has evaded the magic spell, but he thinks that what the sea creature did is too strange. Yet there's no time for him to think about that right now, as the floor master releases more and seems to have no intention to give him any break at all. To the aquatic beast's disappointment, the Grantor dodges the second batch of his unwanted water slice delivery and is raring to evade all of what it throws. With that said, Wimmy sprints at a tremendous speed and slashes the tentacles while dodging the magic spells, and moving his body like that of a puppet. Man, this boy stays true to his skill's name. In a matter of mere seconds, the puppet master has avoided a series of blows, all while laughing in a creepy way which sends shivers down the spine of the audience, who feel bewildered yet seem to be shockingly afraid at the sight, including Abel. In the end, however, the figure of the Grantor fighting for them is purely impressive for the adventurers. After all, the enormous aquatic beast is forming a larger-scale magic circle, and Wimmy with his machete conquers all of them by slashing the magical waves and deflecting them toward the smaller yet still colossal sea creatures. The small fry enemies fall almost at the same time, so Wimmy continues his charge by dashing with the tentacles as footholds, eventually reaching his closest distance from the monster since the battle started. In spite of that, it is not yet time for the Grantor to celebrate, as he then remembers that the floor master can jump and move through water jets like what it did in the confrontation against Camilla. True enough, Wimmy develops a trust issue regarding colossal creatures thanks to the floor master, who moves away from the puppet master, maintaining a safe distance by floating its giant body in the air. Thankfully, it's not the same case with that Berthold guy, but let's put that aside as Wimmy goes under the large body of the monster and jumps backward with his face facing the beast. At this moment, the Grantor feels a disconnection between his consciousness and mind, despite being aware that the movements of the floor master are ultra-high speed, and that it has executed numerous maneuvers within an instant. Wimmy doesn't fail to surprise his enemy, however, as he leaps upward with the machete making efforts to split the monster's body in half. Albeit aware that he will be crushed as soon as the floor master lands, Wimmy feels thrilled on top of knowing that he keeps picking up that miracle this guy has been looking for since the beginning, thinking that being on the verge of demise doesn't mean he has perished yet. As the boss's painful shriek resounds, Wimmy continues his offensive as he strangely doesn't feel Puppet Master's side effects yet, until a black mist appears out of thin air and hinders him. Wimmy quickly deflects the threat the strange smog brings, but it proves to be way more complicated than he expects, and time is running out, pressuring the urge to escape. Therefore, Wimmy goes out of the monster's body and lets himself float mid-air, thanks to the impact, while the floor master, on the other hand, looks like it is complaining about the hole in its shell. Maybe make it bigger next time? Still, everything is just the Grantor imagined, and there are no flaws in his actions, at least for now, although the boy's body is burning from all those maneuvers. His grin screams that his mind is calm though, but that disappears quickly when this guy realizes that, yeah, he's getting a tad bit too excited. As a result, Wimmy reminds himself to focus on the mission and not to spend time on enjoyment, as the lives of the adventurers depend on him now. Those thoughts cause the Grantor to realize that he's having fun the more dangerous and life-threatening the situation is, and that he's unconsciously waiting for this moment the whole time. All of a sudden, the enchanter's sad eyes turn into pure delight and excitement upon finding out that the floor master is still alive. Don't turn into a war freak, young man. Oh, I guess it's more interesting for the sake of the story, huh? Mysteriously enough, the floor master's tentacles spread widely and slowly cover themselves, while the small fries gather around their boss, crawling above the shell of the enormous monster, because no one is trying to interrupt and just letting them do their thing. Anime logic? The adventurers of Noct Level are dumbfounded at what in the world the master is doing until Hans realizes that it could be in the middle of a transformation. Stop them before they finish, man! As a result, the shape and form of the dungeon floor boss and its underlings turn magically weird. Yet it's not the end of the breathtaking spectacle, as a circle made from the small fries floats above the larva-like state of the beast. The principle behind this? Even Wimmy isn't even sure if it's magic. One thing's for sure, however, this is the ace up the aquatic beast's sleeve. Something that every floor master, even the previous crocodile, shows when they are backed into the corner. It doesn't take too long for the transformation to finish, and the colossal enemy evolves into its final form, which is too bright to even call terrifying. As you've expected, Wimmy is grinning ear to ear from excitement as he faces the adversary. Meanwhile, on the ground, or should I say watery ground, Mark urges the youngsters of their squad to evacuate while he and the others handle the defense, and tell Abel, their commander, to leave too. The young man will, of course, refuse and inform the concerned Mark that he will join them for the reason that this commander is stuttering to say. But after saying the word and for a total of 4 times, Abel declares that there is now a glimmer of hope, to which Mark agrees with a smile. Trust 100. Hopefully it won't be a flag this time around. Unfortunately, the evolved form of the floor master is actually troublesome even for Wimmy, specifically the floating support organs in its head, which will make it more difficult for him to dodge in a mid-air confrontation. Therefore, the Grantor enhances his physical and mental prowess by 50 times more, allowing him to expand his vision even further. As he stores the information in his memory, however, Wimmy senses an intense sensation that is making him close to fainting, as long as he successfully processes all the data coming into his head. On top of that, the floor master gains a batch of new abilities thanks to its transformation, as it then creates countless magic circles with arrows materializing in each of them. This time, the tentacles aren't alone in their attempt to destroy Wimmy, but the puppet master is prepared to face their absurd cheat-like abilities, and, as usual, dodges all of them while spinning his body like some kind of a superhuman. No, I won't give an example. More importantly, Wimmy manages to avoid the attacks without having himself get scratched so far, exciting this guy even more as he then smiles from the exhilaration of the battle. And you still think he's wimpy? Nah, I'm sure you don't. The arrows, blades, lances, and tentacles come raining down on Wimmy at a tremendous speed, but the enhanced Grantor can see and even count all of them, including what's outside his field of vision. Unfortunately, one of the enormous arrows manages to appear right at his face, but this is still within Wimmy's expectations as he can now predict their trajectories. Or should I say, all according to calculations. Just imagine the scary shiny glasses meme, please. Afterward, Wimmy evades the projectiles while destroying them in the process. laughing as he enjoys their exchange because this grantor feels omnipotent and satisfied that everything is working in his favor. Instead of getting scared by the risk of perishing with just one mistake, Wimmy is getting more and more thrilled each millisecond, and even treats this exchange with his life at stake as a mere negotiation with the floor boss. Finally, Wimmy admits that he really is feeling joy in the middle of the skirmish, and seems to have accepted it, given that he's at maximum performance all in all. While he's evading the monster's attacks with an excited yet terrifying grin, Marie, on the other hand, has just finished healing the injuries of the party leader, which allows Camilla to ask Hans via transmission magic the state of the evacuation. Therefore, the swordsman informs her that he's busy protecting the wounded, and asks the female knight what they can do to support Wimmy. That question lingers on the leader's mind for just a few seconds, but watching the confrontation between the grantor and the floor master causes her to conclude they will only be nuisances for their provisional member. Thus, Camilla orders Hans to stay away from the fight as much as possible, while she, on the other hand, will focus on defense. Using the giant hunter as a shield, Camilla protects herself from the bullet that suddenly goes her way, all while contemplating Wimmy's declaration that he will bring down the floor master, which for Camilla sounds like an arrogant boast at first. Of course, this female knight thinks about it differently now, mainly because the grantor has cornered the enemy to this extent, and all she can do now is put her trust in the boy. Thus, we are brought back to the battle where Wimmy just can't stop smiling in extreme delight while deflecting the water blades and smiling at the sea creature as if mocking it. But summarizing all the events so far, Wimmy isn't able to strike even once the true body of the floor master, and not the tentacles that keep regenerating. At this rate, the duel will turn into a battle of attrition, and winning will be a far-off dream in that case. So Wimmy desperately thinks of a solution until the black mist suddenly surfaces in his mind. The grantor remembers a shell-like object inside it, instantly assuming it's the monster's weak points, and breaking it will lead to victory. In the middle of his maneuver, Wimmy then sees the direction toward his desire for destruction, and despite being confused as to how he came up with this, the grantor immediately knows that it's the shortest route to the floor master. Wimmy will, of course, treat this as a series of inspirations or whatever suitable solutions they may be when, in simpler words, this is the path toward victory. He trembles like the ones he showed in the past when scared or nervous, and realizes that those continuous trembling might be due to premonitions of triumph, the emergence of similar paths that lay out a miracle among possibilities. That's why even with the 99.9% chance of perishing, Wimmy's exhilaration isn't diminishing even a little bit, and he proceeds, dashing toward the aquatic beast with a face that will surely get bashed by fans, or make a meme out of it if it's an anime. Little do they know that it's all because of the ultra-speed maneuver Wim executes, like it's natural while avoiding the projectiles from the floor master. Eventually, the grantor leaps above, causing his figure to disappear, at least for the adventurers on the ground. The next we see Wimmy is when he's in the clear sky, which is ironic for an underground dungeon, and there's absolutely no rain falling down on him. As gravity pulls him down, Wimmy notices that it's because he has jumped above the clouds as the boy quickly lands toward the countless tentacles that are lying in wait. It's not a problem, however, and more like they're not even worthy of the enhancer's attention, as he simply focuses on the offensive by taking advantage of the fall's acceleration to speed up his charge toward the colossal enemy. Soon after, the sound disappears, and Wimmy can only hear silence, making him feel like he's the only one in the world and the ruler of that space. Yes, this guy is surprisingly Chunabu. Well, thanks to that, Wimmy reaches the strange mark on the monster's forehead, only to find out that the floor master still has one trick up his sleeve: a barrier. Wimmy hurriedly shatters the protective shield of the aquatic beast, which actually puts a large question mark on the boss's head. Using all his remaining strength, Wimmy hardens his body to the maximum level while maintaining the acceleration and infiltrates the floor master's body, making a hole out of it. Due to the impact, the grantor continues descending until he reaches the black mist, not wasting even a millisecond, and immediately swings the machete at the elimination target. Suddenly, the surroundings turn into pure white with some black glitches, although I'm not sure of the color, because it is, a black and white manga. Wimmy is thrown into confusion by the puzzling turn of events, but he then sees a messy-looking egg cracking with some black yolk appearing out of it. Mysteriously, the ominous aura disappears, and the egg that clearly isn't for breakfast turns cleaner, although it's not the time to mind its appearance anymore as someone's hands come out from it. When the full form of the alien-like creature shows itself, unintelligible voices enter the grantor's ear, making Wimmy speechless as he simply stares at the terrifying entity, who then tells him something using an unfamiliar language. Neither Wimmy nor the manga's translator fails to understand the words of the mysterious creature, Yet the protagonist feels nothing bad upon hearing those, as he then replies with a yes. After some glitches, Wimmy returns to the original realm, where he suffers from exhaustion while catching his breath. Upon turning around, however, the Grantor sees the Floor Master on its last legs, though I'm unsure if you can call the tentacles legs or arm. Just correct me if I'm wrong. More importantly, it means that the battle finally ends, meaning that Wimmy's eyes aren't filled with excitement anymore. Fortunately, seeing the figures of Camilla and the adventurers of Noct Libel running toward him with a smile relieves the Grantor. And yes, there are no ninjas cutting onions for this touching scene. But oh well. Unfortunately, the fatigue gets into Wimmy as his vision blurs even without the editor's help, and he eventually passes out with his head facing the water. Hearing the continuous yells of his name wakes the Grantor, though, which leads him to see the concerned looks of all his companions, along with the disappearance of the rainfall that confirms their victory. The end results? Discovery of 3 gold veins, confirmation of 28 new monster species, a total of 106 wounded members, 12 severely wounded, and most of all, 0 fatalities. Meanwhile, on the dungeon's 50th floor, a frog monster who can weirdly stand like a human is attacking Kronos with his tongue, although it misses the attack, which is undeniably unfortunate. Okay, calm down. I know you're fed up with derogatory jokes. Kronos then signals Nicoré to do her thing, which the priest eventually does as she casts the spell Break in Order and hits the humanoid frog. Then binding magic befalls the monster thanks to Sophia, so Kronos orders the mage to deal the finishing blow. Therefore, Melis lets out a magical flame membrane and pushes their enemy away, while the party leader embeds magic in his sword, because he'll be the one who'll finish it, of course. After a single stab, Kronos follows it with numerous slashes and swiftly defeats the humanoid frog, while looking back at it like he's some kind of a cool hero. After a humph, Kronos then wipes off the stain on his face while the 2 girls immediately fawn over their crush. Fortunately, Sophia isn't developing some romantic feelings for their party leader, and is just purely impressed at their battle prowess. Moreover, she thinks that their coordination has improved considerably, along with the expansion of her skills, which now consist of minor tasks like reading maps, which was also Wimmy's duty before. It turns out, however, that Lady Elf is doubtful if their achievements are really remarkable, despite the abilities and talents of her 3 companions. Sophia concludes that a successful future is not within her sight, and Dragon's Wings can no longer return to their once famous reputation as vanguards. To put it simply, Sophia is immune from Kronos' non-existent charm, and she doesn't believe that defeating Floor Masters is physically possible, even with their group's recovered state. Of course, she doesn't voice out her opinions, so we are then brought to their headquarters where the group is happily enjoying dinner. In fact, their delight is so much to handle that everyone is not saying a word, and are all wearing troubled faces. Okay, they're clearly not happy. The one who breaks the ice is Melis, who suddenly talks about Nikure's cooked meal, which has some carrot stems on it, which leads Kronos to tell the girl, "You're always a bit clumsy," and makes fun of Melis afterward. As a result, the group finally shares some laughs, yet it turns into silence once again for the reason that, according to Sophia, is the lingering heavy atmosphere given they're not the adventuring party they used to be after all. Eventually, Kronos suggests a solution, and with all smiles, tells them that they should expand their party, which makes his hardcore fans feel a tad bit troubled. They absolutely don't want it. However, their leader is firmly determined to commence this recruiting plan, thinking it's the best way they can return to being on the front lines as they could attract more members after all. Therefore, Nikure asks how many they are planning to add. So Kronos reveals his desire to hire dozens of adventurers, or even more. Now that's more troubling for these 3 ladies, who are all speechless, harboring each of their own reasons. As for the selection, Kronos indirectly says he wants to increase the members of his harem. The exact words are different, of course, but you know the meaning. He then asks Melis's opinion, but seeing the mage averting eye contact forces the manipulative smile of the Dragon's Wings leader to show. This is no longer new for Sophia, as well as the response of Melis, who ultimately agrees that recruiting girls rather than men is the absolute way to go, which for the elf is one of the problems of their group. After all, Nikure and Melis undeniably have feelings for Kronos, which the latter also reciprocates, meaning he'll do the same if not focus more on the new women joining Dragon's Wings. This is already stressful enough for the sighing Sophia, so she musters the courage to advise Kronos to be more cautious in expanding their party, as they don't have the money and experience in that field in the first place. After a minute of silence, Kronos replies with a disagreement because he wants to bet on their current strength and abilities. So Sophia yells her complaints only to be stopped by the enraged glare of the Dragon's Wings leader. Man, poor elf just wants your team to prosper. Unfortunately, Kronos 100% believes that they could somehow manage the funds by defeating a floor master, but that makes it more problematic for Sophia because this elf knows that there's no way they can do that. On top of that, Kronos smugly tells Sophia to tell more of his concerns in his room later. You can hit him if you like. Miss Elf must be protected from this guy. In response, Sophia informs the whole party that they haven't obtained the authorization for a floor master hunt based on the records from none other than Wimmy. Oops, it might be too late when Sophia realizes that saying the name is taboo, as Kronos is already enraged while reminding her not to say that Grantor's name. Well, understood, I guess? Nah, Wimmy. Unfortunately, the elf is so frightened that she apologizes and refers to the guy as predecessor. Instead, while revealing that based on Wimmy's records, all the necessary items are present for the authorization. That's why it's strange that it hasn't been granted yet, as there are no visible mistakes from Wimmy's side, and it should be okay now under normal circumstances. However, learning that their funds need to wait longer angers Kronos as he smashes the bottle on the table and lashes out while complaining as to why Wimmy hinders them even now. Watching the scene, Sophia comes to think that their meetings lately are all to put the blame on the Grantor and make him a villain. Meanwhile, Wimmy wakes up only to see an unfamiliar ceiling with a chandelier, a typical sign that the protagonist has transferred into another world. But this is definitely not the case in this series. Instead, Wimmy is greeted by his beloved friend Marie, who prompts him to say, "Good morning," causing pain to befall the Grantor as he hasn't fully recovered yet. Don't force yourself, young man viewers are concerned. He still tries hard to remember all the events though, and panics after recalling them while asking Marie where everyone else is. Therefore, the Grantor gets punished for overexerting himself, even though we and Miss Stalker reminded him not to. But thankfully, Marie is there to calm him down by revealing that all of Noctilli Bell survives despite the injuries. Turns out Wimmy has been sleeping for 5 whole days, according to the young sage, who suddenly smiles to tell her friend, "You really did well." The Grantor is speechless for a second, but he eventually lies his exhausted body in the bed again, relieved and satisfied that his efforts aren't in vain after all. Afterward, Marie asks if it's okay to tell Camilla about the news, and of course that's fine for Wimmy, so the female sage then starts to leave, but not until she asks her friend if he had fun in the battle. Despite being taken aback by the question, Wimmy averts his eyes in embarrassment and says it is a bit enjoyable, to which Marie replies with a delightful grin. When she leaves, it doesn't take too long for someone to rush at the door, open it, and make Wimmy panic as he yells the party leader's name. After all, Camilla stands before him and bows her head to show how grateful she is, which is actually troubling for the Grantor given his personality. Still, Camilla feels so grateful to the point that she doesn't know how to repay the Grantor for saving Noctilli Bell from their demise. The party leader shouts aloud, "Thank you," but Wimmy doesn't know how to reply, so Eshan is showing a mischievous smile while watching. Thus, the boy calms down and says he's glad that everyone is safe, moving Camilla and making her happier, as she then hugs Wimmy and buries his face into her armored chest. "Please restrain yourself, ma'am. Her boy can't handle that much pressure and is already going out of breath." Unfortunately, Marie is getting envious as it turns out she's stopped herself from doing it since the beginning. Come on, dear author, give them their moment. Afterward, Mark arrives with Monica, Hans, Abel, who is crying, and basically everyone at the adventuring party. Seeing Wimmy being strangled by Camilla is a sign for Abel to do the same though, and he ultimately rushes to the Grantor while the poor sage is getting more and more jealous each second. Then, Marie turns into full defensive mode when Monica says she'll hug Wimmy too, and calls her names along the lines of dummy, while Hans, on the other hand, calms their leader because their benefactor is already suffering. Therefore, Camilla turns serious and gets everyone's attention before reminding them not to put more burden on Wimmy's body, so they should make the greetings quick. Doesn't that contradict you, Camilla-san? Well, the adventurers think so too, but they're too scared to argue with their leader. Soon after, the ceremony starts, and they all form a line while eagerly waiting for the person in front to finish. Unfortunately, the man's gratitude ends with just 2 sentences, because Camilla declares it's the end of his time, and like him, she wants to express her thanks more profoundly, yet is unable to do so due to the restrictions. Thus, the event continues as we spot a rare human species effortlessly disguising himself to no avail, because Camilla sees him and scolds Abel for attempting to join the line. "It's the second time for you, right?" That's considered null. Put simply, that's the conversation between the 2 comrades because, as you already know, Camilla wants to do it too. Mark plans to do something illegal if that happens in reality though, while Hans, on the one hand, intervenes to drag their party leader away, reminding her to rest as she is also a patient after all. Witnessing all those comedic exchanges, Wimmy lets out a dry laugh and the ceremony ends after a few more hours, leaving him and Marie in the hospital room. Despite how exhausting the day is, Wimmy plays the scenes in his head where everyone is thanking him, mixed with impressed at the battle performance he has shown. Even though the expression on his face is like this, Wimmy actually feels proud and confident that he can join Noctali Bell in the future, not to mention grateful that his companions managed to keep away the troublesome interviewers. However, it seems like this banished grantor still can't recover from his trauma, and thinks that some of them don't mean what they say. Therefore, he forces himself to believe that they're genuine kindness, and that he doesn't really harbor all those bad thoughts. But it proves to be too hard in the end, so the grantor just sleeps them all. No, it is not stalking this time, and Marie is simply worried as she stands outside the room. In the Adventurer Guild, Dominic reports the awakening of the banished grantor to the guildmaster, and asks him if Noctali Bell has submitted their report, because their victory against the boss of Floor 98 is already the talk of the city. Moreover, the rumors about a provisional member defeating the floormaster alone are already circulating, so there's a need for them to verify that information. Dominic notices that the guildmaster is strangely happy though, and the man whose face is taking too long to be revealed says he personally wants to visit the rumored boy and investigate the case regarding the subjugation of the dungeon's 97th floor boss. The next moment, we are brought to the next arc's prologue, where Wimmy and Marie are finally having another touching moment. Although it seems like there's no happy mood at all when the female sage tears out as she makes the grantor promises to remember and think of her at least once a day. Unfortunately, Wimmy has no idea what she's trying to say, and the scene ends, which is then replaced by a question: who can prove that the labyrinth is really there? Turns out that this comes from a book written by a doctor named Heinke, who questions the belief that the labyrinth extends downward, given that teleportation portals are used to progress from one floor to another. Of course, the one who's reading it is none other than Wimmy, who feels quite amazed about the contents, and the author himself, who this grantor believes is a sympathetic person. He's wondering why Dr. Heinke's hypothesis can't be seen in academic journals, though, to the point he doesn't immediately hear Camilla if she happens not to loud in her voice. As a result, Wimmy sees the party leader's irritated smile, leading the boy to apologize for ignoring her. Fortunately, it's just a joke. So Wimmy then talks about how happy he is for obtaining the book Labyrinth Madness through some connections, which seems to refer to Camilla because she knows that its distribution is mysterious. It turns out to be accurate according to the hospitalized grantor, who prattles about how true it is with a very long dialogue, basically saying that the books are mainly put in unofficial places. Thus, Wimmy feels happy that the members of Noct Libel might have the same interest as him regarding scientific journals. After that, Camilla informs the grantor about a certain visitor who will meet them in the living room, so Wimmy gets up with the help of a walking aid. And of course, Camilla, although he's close to crashing without her. According to a doctor, Wimmy has pushed the limits of his body in the previous battle, so he needs to rest, which makes it weird why the visitor can't come into the hospital room instead. Yep, it's really strange. Therefore, Wimmy asks Camilla what she means by the word visitor, causing the party leader to reveal that it is the guildmaster. In a fountain on the way to the hospital, a large, terrifying-looking man approaches a father and son tandem along with a puppy who barks at the stranger. Turns out Dominic is also there to remind his superior not to intimidate others, because the said stranger is none other than the guildmaster/priest, Gothelfa No Tower Wait. Too long, let's call him Got. The man up is trembling in fear, yet the guildmaster seems to be purely irritated when a reporter suddenly approaches him to talk about the matter with Wimmy. Of course, Got will pay the man no mind, but as if the reporter will give up that easily when he can just pester the priest. However, seeing he isn't the slightest bit interested prompts the reporter to resort to his next plan, an offering of a quote-unquote donation to the guild. Needless to say, this man has messed up 100% because Got treats that as a temptation for bribe money and is clearly enraged. But Dominic can only go, oh, he knows what will happen next. As the guy expects, the reporter is enveloped with fear as he literally looks up at the guildmaster who is ready to gift some smash. Dominic hurriedly stops him from hurting the newsman, but it turns out that Got simply claps his hand right in the face of the reporter. The wind pressure is already enough for him to fall on the ground, though while having excessive question marks on his head and with some nosebleeds as a bonus. You never mess with a principled man, no-name character. See? The enraged guildmaster then reminds the reporter that he was a priest before becoming the head of the guild, so tolerating this indecent behavior is absolutely out of the question. While the man trembles in fear, Got approaches and advises him to show more determination, chasing after the quote-unquote the sunset owl, or the fox. Please, if you have any idea what they are, just throw it down in the comments. TLA putting that aside, Dominic informs the guildmaster that his reputation is also doomed from hurting the reporter, leading Got to threaten the man to not write this news and even offers to heal the wound, although the guy refuses. You know what that means? The reporter just got a scoop and he'll publish it. So much for the threat, Guildmaster-san. Eventually, Got arrives at his destination and apologizes to Wimmy for the inconvenience. Yet the Grantor looks more terrified than concerned, especially because the man in front of him is the Guildmaster himself. Wimmy tries his very best to introduce himself, but Got is just too intimidating, as it turns out that he was a legendary adventurer who paved the way in the labyrinth with a giant warhammer. Also, thanks to priests being the second job with the highest physical enhancement, Got basically becomes a warrior who can self-heal, which is why he's also known as the Diamond, a surprisingly not toony nickname. His presence is scary enough for Wimmy to shriek, though, and permit the Guildmaster to call him by first name, so Got lightens up the mood with a laugh and reveals that he's there to celebrate, along with some little verification. Kronos should be scared. Before that, Got praises the Grantor for solo defeating the Floormaster, which leads them to surpass level 98. Unfortunately, Wimmy is so confused as to what this living legend means, and tells him that their victory is thanks to all of Noct Labelle's efforts, and by no means solo. Got bursts into laughter upon hearing that, and informs the Grantor that provoking the Floormaster to its final form and obliterating it is practically his victory alone. Moreover, Camilla has plans to support it by speaking on behalf of Noct Labelle, so what's left is the Grantor's consent. On top of that, Wimmy is invited to the Victory Festival ceremony and will receive a staggering cash reward. An honorable event for Wimmy, as the event is the largest celebration that occurs every time a Floormaster is defeated. Furthermore, the festival this time is a never-before-seen one, given that the conquest of floors 97 and 98 will be celebrated at the same time, making it the biggest celebration in the whole history of Full Brown. With the Guildmaster's glare, the conversation moves on to the main topic, the subjugation of the high-level floor 97 by Dragon's Wing's 4 members, and the extraordinarily fast victory of Noct Labelle, level 98, the single adventurer that eliminated the aquatic beast and the Dragon's Wings with these. Got connects the dots and leads him to this Grantor. As a matter of fact, even the Guildmaster doubts the Dragon's Wings side of the story, so he informs Wimmy that they haven't granted authorization for Boss Croco's defeat yet. Dominic then appears as the first who raises suspicions and stops the approval, surprising Wimmy because he's sure that the required documents are in order. Undoubtedly, Dominic agrees, however. He senses that they don't credit Wimmy whatsoever, given that there are discrepancies between the report and their investigation. Thanks to Wimmy's reaction earlier, Dominic confirms that Wimmy is unconsciously downplaying himself, which helps him to verify the details in the report that says the 3 damaged the Floormaster, and it is the Grantor who reveals it. In the not-so-distant past, Dominic disguises himself to interview Kronos, and learns from him that he splits the monster in half to attain victory. Yep, it's just another reason to hate this guy. Hearing his own version of the story causes Wimmy to let out a disappointed face, at which I think is the first time in this series. Correct me if I'm wrong. Thus, Dominic concludes that Kronos is exaggerating to steal the credit, causing the troubled Grantor to agree and complain. Fortunately, Got doesn't believe those lies from the Dragon's Wings leader, allowing Wimmy to ask what it really is that they're expecting from him. Declaring he won't overlook falsehood, Got tells the banished Grantor that he has the right to restore his honor. Such powerful words are too much for Wimmy, but he understands that the Adventurer Guild wants him to take credit for conquering Floor 97. Unfortunately, the inner dilemma darkens the boy's thoughts, and he comes up with a rather surprising yet somehow disappointing answer. The Dragon's Wings passed level 97 before he left the party and joined the dungeon dive wherein they conquered Floor 98, and his contributions are appreciated. Is there any problem with that? Says the Grantor with a cold tone, shocking both Dominic and Got. I'm sorry, Wimmy. I'm sure the viewers have something to say about your decision. Regardless, Wimmy realizes he's rude and apologizes to the Guildmaster, so Got decides to understand the boy's choice with the condition that Wimmy will inevitably accept the honor regarding Floor 98. Soon after, the two exit the room and meet Camilla in the hallway, who's asking them about the situation. Well, Got replies with another question because he's wondering if Wimmy is aware that he really defeated the Floormaster. In addition, the Guildmaster says that the young Grantor looks too ordinary, but evidently has the ability to finish them off in an instant if he gets serious. Camilla just smiles, however, as she tells them that Wimmy isn't accepting money offers no matter how large it is, like what happened to her in the past. Man, Camilla might be holding a grudge. Therefore, the Adventurers Guild's conclusion is not to get too involved with the banished. As Got then informs Camilla that Wimmy doesn't accept the story about his achievement on Floor 97. Unfortunately, the Guildmaster and Dominic leave without being able to convince the Grantor. But the words of that boy have left a deep mark in Got's mind, which leads him to wonder if Wimmy really treats his encounter with them as seriously as anyone would. A few days later, the hospitalized Grantor is in his room along with Abel, who seems to have been taking care of him since recently. In fact, this guy visits every day and is the one who enthusiastically volunteers to care for the Grantor despite his busyness. Why isn't it Marie, you wonder? Well, that's asking for too much, shippers. Also, Abel feels very grateful to Wimmy to the point that he's called him handsome so many times, which is a bit embarrassing for the Grantor. Take the compliment. Since the hospitalization, Wimmy has received many visits, not just from Simon, but everyone in the Knockley Bell too, including the one who gossips about Wimmy being creepy. Character development, huh? There are also cases in which families come over to say thanks, like this woman, who I assume is Mark's wife, along with the veteran adventurer's son. Remember the scene showing Mark's nightlife? Yeah, it's better not to think about it. Thanks to numerous visits, Wimmy reaches the point where he can't remember from whom exactly the gift he receives, especially because Knockley Bell has 122 members, not to mention their loved ones. After a short while, another one arrives and introduces himself as Gregor, the leader of Knockley Bell's society branch, to Sumabachu. With the existence of such branches, the adventuring party has a staggering 1,000, or maybe even putting that aside. Gregor pays his respects to the somewhat hero of Knockley Bell as the representative of their organization, but his behavior feels strange for Wimmy that he comes to think, are there people like me in the branches? The ear-to-ear grin of the branch leader answers that question, and even makes Wimmy feel a great affinity with him. Well, he seems trustworthy enough, right? Gregor then hands the Grantor a gift that looks like candies, but their tremendous amount leads Wimmy to refuse, especially when he learns that this is a bribe. Thus, the party leader leaves with a smile on his face, until he suddenly catches sight of the book Labyrinth Madness, and asks the Grantor if he reads it too. The two seem to have the same interests, so they talk about the scientific journal, which Gregor then reveals to have contributed to it by writing an article titled Fluorescent Paint for Drawing Transfer Portals. Turns out, Wimmy has read it too, so Gregor, who, by the way, has the pen name Garyon, now treats his relationship with the Grantor as a colleague. Eventually, Gregor takes his leave, but not until he tells Wimmy to keep all of these a secret to Camilla. The Grantor feels no suspicions about it, though, and is just happy he meets someone like him. Not too long after, the day of the discharge finally arrives, so Wimmy bids goodbye to the hospital and walks toward the gate outside, wherein he sees Camilla in casual clothes waiting for him. Wimmy apologizes for making the party leader wait, but perhaps he's too distracted staring at the woman who is unusually not in her night uniform. His long stare flusters Camilla, and she's slowly turning into a maiden in love, especially when Wimmy yells, "It looks really good," and the leader starts to panic. Man, this boy is too naturally dangerous. With that said, Camilla reveals she's always wearing armor for the past few years, and it is the doctor and Hans pestering that forces her into doing this. I feel like I'm hearing someone saying good job on the other side of the screen. Well, it might just be my imagination. Wimmy can't help but wonder if Camilla wears armor when sleeping too, but that's for another story as they start walking. Finally, Camilla asks Wimmy if he has already considered joining Knockley Bell, especially now that other adventuring parties might offer him tempting salaries from at least 15,000 mercs, this world's currency. Wimmy feels shocked at the staggering amount, and Camilla declares that she's willing to increase the offer up to 20,000 with 1,000 increments every time someone surpasses it. Unfortunately, the Grantor thinks he doesn't deserve such a high amount every month because for him, defeating the Floor Master is just a stroke of luck. And although he'll receive the subjugation reward, the salary seems to be a bit too much. Seeing Camilla's unwavering decision makes Wimmy suspect, though. But it is himself he's having doubts because this guy is still in the middle of character development. Wimmy thinks he's not deserving. On the other hand, Camilla doesn't want to pressure and confine him from joining other groups if he wants to, but she promises Wimmy that he'll have the best possible conditions in Knockley Bell. Touched by that, Wimmy sincerely thanks the party leader, unaware that the next topic seems to be more serious than he thinks, as Camilla proceeds to warn him about other guilds. But before she can finish her sentence, Camilla senses someone's ominous presence not far from where they are, yet there's nothing there besides them and nature, so she assumes it must have been her imagination. Therefore, Camilla resumes the unfinished sentence, which turns out to be a warning for Wimmy not to join the guilds who handle dark maps. They are notorious for exploiting people and doing illegal businesses that there's no need for me to mention what they are. So Camilla is quite stern on this one, as she then asks if Wimmy knows about the Twilight Owl. Somehow, learning that the Grantor hasn't heard of it relieves Camilla because it means that Wimmy is still on the right path, given that Twilight Owl is the representation of vast darkness itself. and they take advantage of the desire, greed, or weakness of young, clueless adventurers. She assumes that they might show up after they leave the hospital, but thankfully they seem to have doubts. So Wimmy gains the luxury of keeping them and their dangers in mind. They walk along the road through a small forest. Meanwhile, at a tavern, we see the dragon's wings gather together. Kronos approaches Nikra, asking how she likes challenger number 15. She asks if it is the red-haired warrior girl. He replies that she's the one. Nikra says she isn't sure, as the girl seems nice. The guy explains that although she's certainly weak, she would brighten up their group. They discuss other girls as applicants for their group. Sophia, lost in her thoughts, feels this is a bad idea because at this rate, they won't find a suitable group member. Even if she intervenes, Kronos will get angry, and nothing will change. From outside, they hear news about Night Dragonfly defeating the floor boss. This catches the girls' attention. They talk about how amazing it is that Night Dragonfly beat the floor boss on their first run. Kronos stands up upon hearing this and walks over to the guys, asking if it's true. They are shocked to recognize him as a member of Dragon's Wings. They stammer, saying hello awkwardly. Kronos asks for more details. They explain that there is no official announcement from the guild. It's just a rumor. However, everyone knows that Night Dragonfly has descended to the new floor. They think the story sounds implausible. Kronos points out that it has been 3 years since the 97th floor of the labyrinth was cleared. Sophia knows Wimmy has joined Night Dragonfly, and Kronos is furious about this, having heard rumors about it. He considers it a betrayal. Kronos asks about their leader, Camilla, defeating the boss. It's expected of her, but the guys mention a strange rumor. The boss wasn't even defeated by a member of Night Dragonfly. An adventurer who didn't join them supposedly did it. Kronos interrupts, questioning whether this outsider was part of another group. The man clarifies that the individual wasn't from another group. Rumor has it that the boss was defeated by a temporary member of Night Dragonfly, who did it alone. Kronos angrily dismisses this as nonsense, insisting that it's impossible. The man insists he's just relaying the rumor. Kronos wonders what kind of person could defeat the floor boss single-handedly, and for a moment, Wimmy's silhouette flashes in his mind. Kronos instantly becomes enraged, shouting that no one could do that. He grabs one of the men, warning him not to spread lies. The other man tries to calm him down, saying it's just a rumor. Sophia jumps up and begs Kronos to stop, reminding him that everyone is watching. Kronos lets go of the man and apologizes, explaining that he has been in a bad mood lately. One man from the tavern agrees, saying he too finds it hard to believe that someone single-handedly defeated the boss. But there's also talk of a small group conquering the 97th floor. He adds that the guild still hasn't confirmed anything. People begin whispering, speculating about who it could be. Some suggest it's Steel Fist, as their group has recently been raised to rank A, and there are rumors that he defeated the golem with his fists. Kronos dismisses it as a paperwork issue delaying confirmation. Toth chuckles, suggesting that it's hardly just paperwork, and asks if Kronos knows what class the temporary Night Dragonfly member is. Kronos says it's a warlock, and asks what he's getting at. Daz implies that Kronos won't be able to rest on his laurels for long. Daz adds that his group has no place in the A rank, and Kronos responds by asking if everyone has heard that he has been in a bad mood lately. People seem surprised by the growing tension. Daz asks Kronos if he'd like to practice with him. Kronos accepts the offer, with Daz saying he'll teach him to hold his tongue. The crowd cheers for Daz, placing bets on the fight. Sophia realizes this could badly affect their rank. As the fight begins, Daz gets knocked around like a rag doll, clearly overmatched. Kronos continues to hit him mercilessly. Sophia begs him to stop, but Kronos insists Daz hasn't learned his lesson yet. He delivers a powerful blow, causing blood to splatter. At that moment, Sophia uses her magic to stop Kronos, telling him the fight is over. Seeing the battered state of Daz, Kronos turns away and walks off. The crowd is astonished at his strength, acknowledging that this is the power of the leader who defeated the floor boss. Kronos returns to his group and apologizes to Sophia, admitting he overreacted. He tells them they shouldn't believe silly rumors, as more fame awaits them if they stay focused. Nikra approaches Kronos and asks him to calm down, reminding him that they don't need to rush. Slowly but surely, they will earn the recognition they deserve. There is still a lot of uncharted territory on the 98th floor, and they have plenty of work ahead. Sophia agrees, stating that they need to concentrate on finding new recruits for the group. Kronos acknowledges that they are right. Looking up at the sky, Kronos declares that they are dragon's wings, and they will fight to the end. Smiling, he announces they'll move on to the 99th floor, saying there's nothing scarier than an enraged dragon. In the alleyway, someone overhears them and takes note of it. Meanwhile, Abel talks to Wimmy about resuming their training, asking if it's okay to start soon. Bettina inquires about the maze's knowledge and suggests that he join them next week. Mark, who is always ready for anything, asks if they are drinking to celebrate Wimmy's recovery. Many people invite Wimmy to go shopping for new clothes, overwhelming him with offers. Hooray sits in her room, watching Wimmy, and begins to realize that he is acting strangely. Wilborn is animated by rumors about someone defeating the boss of the 98th floor, a feat that few can accomplish. The rumors about Wimmy spread widely even before the guild's official report is published. Many now have their eyes on him. While Hooray works for the Sage Association, Wimmy strolls around the city, suspiciously moving between cafes and pubs. She becomes suspicious, wondering where he's going. One day, someone in a cloak is spotted running down the street. It's month unknown, day unknown, and it's 1428. Wimmy emerges from a building, not wearing his usual clothes, looking suspicious. Hooray assumes he might be meeting a woman and tells herself that it's impossible. He shouldn't have friends besides her. Yet more people have grown close to him recently, especially Abel. She resolves that she won't let anyone take Wimmy away from her. The streets of Wilborn are busy, and Wimmy sneaks around to avoid being noticed. Hooray follows him, careful not to let him out of her sight. She wonders if someone is following him too, since he's acting so nervous. At that moment, she spots someone suspicious and casts a shackle spell to trap them. The man is pinned to the ground, accused of stalking. Hooray leaps on him, demanding to know who he is and what group he belongs to. To her surprise, she recognizes the man. It's Abel. Shocked, she gets to her feet, asking him why he's following them.
In a moment, he is speechless and has no idea how to string a few words together. He explains that he is trying to imitate him, to which the girl asks how. Abel explains that Vim fought alone and took over the floor boss, so he wants to become like him, just as strong and smart. Heidi Mary nods and says that she understands him. She says that Vim really is pretty cool back then, but she decides to clarify what that has to do with becoming his stalker. He explains that he wants to copy his habits. He feels like Vim is different and sees the world very differently from them, so he wants to watch him and learn something new and ingenious. The girl says she understands him, to which the boy asks if it is true. But Heidi Mary says that he should give up stalking and change tactics. The guy tries to talk to her and stop her. Abel begins to say that he doesn't know it is so bad. He explains that it is his first time and apologizes to her. The girl tells him to listen to her, explaining that she doesn't care who he is following as long as he doesn't target Vim. She shouts for him not to dare trespass on her and not to dare steal her bread. Abel grins and says he is in the right. She does not like this laugh and asks what kind of laugh it is. Hidur says that he has never done such a thing, to which he replies that at this point it is deliberate because he is imitating Vim. She begins to ask him to drop it and not to do it again. She also explains that for the first time she will forgive him. However, the next time will not be the same. She explains that she has no time to waste with him, but Abel immediately asks her why she is following them. When she notices him, she is stunned and doesn't know what to say, but she makes the excuse that Camilla asked her to keep an eye on Vim. Eel looks at her with incomprehension. She asks why he is staring at her like that, but immediately she starts looking around and talking about how she missed out on Vim because of him. Vim goes into a certain establishment and is waiting for someone. Then a man comes in and asks how long he has been waiting, to which he explains that he recently came in and ordered them a drink. Outside the window, Abel and Heidi Mary are already sitting in the flower bed. The girl is shocked by what she sees. Abel says that the girl is also beautiful, but she denies it because it is impossible. Vim would never do such a thing. She starts shaking Abel, asking how it is possible. It is a disaster for her, and she asks what she should do now. The girl yells that he is drinking coffee just like that, even though he used to add milk to it. She also starts saying that he is starting to grow up. Abel tries to calm her down by saying that she is too loud, but he is also surprised that Vim came to the girl for some reason. She asks him to keep it down. In a moment, they notice that she brought him something. Then Heidi Mary starts to look at her. It is Sophia. The girl recognizes her, saying she remembers her. She is one of Kronos' girls. She used to be in charge of all the paperwork in the Dragon Wing. It would be worth it to write some guidance for Sophia at least. Vim apologizes for making her job harder, to which she says he should have met her earlier. The girl apologizes to him and says that it is wrong to ask him to do that. He thinks that, in his interactions with Sophia, he realizes that she is a very smart girl. At first, he thought she was just in love with Kronos like the others, but it turns out she joined the group for the wrong reasons. Pointing to the map, he says that this is the mine they share with the other group. Sophia says she understands him. Not having to think about healing potions anymore, Vim says it is a great deal. The guy remembers how Kronos listened to him and thinks about how Sophia understood him right away. He continues to explain to her. On the report, Vim says they can meet again. It will be more convenient for them. The girl agrees and thanks the guy for the explanation. She also apologizes for causing him trouble. The guy starts to think about relying on her. However, he catches himself worrying about Dragonwing. But Vim immediately turns to Sophia. He decides to tell her about the boss of the 97th floor, but he sees her indifference in the reflection of her glasses and decides that he shouldn't have talked about it. However, he could say a lot of things, but things will get better when they get official confirmation. So he asks her not to worry so much. Vim also says that they should have enough money to live for a while and to last until the official confirmation. The main thing is that they shouldn't do anything unreasonable. He immediately apologizes to the girl and says that he should not give advice because he was kicked out and should not listen to him. Vim may not have been loved there, but it is still his home for a while. Sophia explains that she can pass on his words, to which he says it is better not to. The girl smiles and says that she will tell them the same thing, only from herself, explaining that she will handle it somehow. She says goodbye to Vim and leaves. Abel suggests that maybe they should have gotten in trouble, to which Heidi Mary says that it is okay and that she is one of Kronos' girls. She isn't going to hit on him. She smiles and says she is giving him 3 hours of free time. Abel doesn't know what she is talking about. He decides to clarify that he and Vim are old friends, to which the girl confirms it. Heidi Mary calls him Vim's fellow countryman. The boy wonders why they are following him, suggesting that it isn't easier to just socialize. She begins to question why him. She has grown too attached to him. She explains that a lot has happened between them. She immediately suggests that they both forget this moment and that they saw each other. The boy agrees to that. Vim thinks about the fact that he isn't going to work with the Dragonwing group anymore. But still, he wishes them nothing but success and does his best. He should only concentrate on personal matters. He has one single choice to make. He would like to join the Night Dragonfly. The choice is not difficult, or rather, it has to be uncomplicated.
Camilla asks Vim if he has finally recovered a bit from his injuries. Vim lets out a long breath of relief as he stands before her. Camilla comments that he must be pretty tired, but Vim awkwardly denies it. She admonishes him for being humble in his report and orders him to rewrite it to properly reflect that he defeated the floor boss. The report lies on the desk, filled with complex text and diagrams. Camilla shifts the topic, stating she wishes to hear his answer to the question she asked him before. Vim looks nervous, sweating slightly as he processes the weight of the request. He thinks to himself that the words he needs to say are clear to him. However, he feels a strange hesitation deep within himself holding him back. Camilla sincerely requests that he join the Nacht Libel, clarifying it is not a mere proposal. She assures him he doesn't need to be fully ready and can leave any time if he dislikes the terms. She encourages him to just take that first small step toward a decision. Her armored hand reaches out to him in a welcoming gesture. Vim reflects that he is tired of being indecisive and wants to change. He affirms to himself that he can change, and that he should change. Remembering the smiles of his friends, he desires to fix his twisted nature so he can truly laugh with them. He realizes this is his chance and starts to stammer and answer. He struggles with his words, feeling that his initial attempt isn't quite right. He decides to stop overthinking and just say it all at once. Vim shakes Camilla's hand firmly and asks her to take care of him from now on. Camilla smiles broadly, expressing her happiness that he made the choice. Vim exits the room, looking slightly bewildered by the sudden turn of events. He walks into the guild hall to find everyone clapping and cheering for him. The members welcome him aboard with a round of applause, while Camilla stands in the doorway. A guild member pushes him forward, urging him to say something to the crowd. Vim's heart pounds as he tells himself not to stumble and to act like a true member. He introduces himself as Vim Strauss and vows to do his best to the fullest. The crowd erupts into cheers of congratulations and welcome. They lift him up to hoist him into the air in celebration. Vim is tossed up in the air by his new guildmates. Camilla watches the festivities with a warm, satisfied smile. The narrative explains that Nacht Libel naturally reaped the rewards for defeating the floor boss. The guild issues a formal declaration of victory, marking the start of full-scale exploration. The scene displays the rocky and uneven landscape of the 98th floor. The strategy involves using several small teams to expand the map efficiently. Vim worries about whether he will be able to get along with a partner he has never met. He tries to boost his confidence, reminding himself that he is a member of Nacht Libel now. He introduces himself to his new partner, saying he looks forward to working with him. He bows energetically, shouting his name and promising not to hold anyone back. Vim celebrates internally, relieved that he managed to speak without stumbling. Vim stands frozen in awkward silence as the person in the beanie confronts him, demanding he stop acting like this is their first meeting. The stranger reveals herself as Bettina, pointing out that they teamed up just last time to his utter confusion. Bettina sighs that it is fine since she is plain anyway, while Vim frantically apologizes for forgetting her completely. Vim panics internally, realizing he messed up despite their study sessions and claiming he was just distracted by other things. Camilla stands atop a rocky outcrop and addresses the guild, ordering everyone to stay sharp and maintain frequent communication. The exploration team sprints through the cavernous tunnels, their footsteps echoing against the stone walls. Vim slides to a sudden halt, his boots skidding across the ground as he senses something ahead. He checks his magical map, warning the team that a large entity is hiding near the fork in the path. Shaking off his earlier embarrassment, Vim tells himself to focus solely on the mission at hand. He reminds himself that his role as part of the high-mobility map-making unit is crucial, and he can apologize to Bettina with snacks later. Vim analyzes the threat instantly, identifying it as a Type D wyvern located exactly 25 meters ahead. The team captain reacts with surprise at the speed and precision of the novice's report. A strange visual overlay activates in Vim's vision, triggering a familiar and intense sensation within him. He sprints forward as the wyvern peeks out from behind the rock, his eyes locked onto the target. Vim calculates the trajectory instantly, determining that 3 jumps off a loose rock will land him on its neck. He prepares to execute the move, convinced that the plan will work perfectly. A flashback reveals his manic grin during the boss fight, the thrill of overcoming low probabilities making his heart race. The memory is interrupted by Camilla calling his name through the communication device on his wrist. Vim reports the encounter with the wyvern and requests permission to engage the target immediately. Camilla acknowledges the situation with a cold expression, but orders him to avoid combat if at all possible. Vim stops in his tracks, looking over his shoulder with a confused at the command to stand down. He reluctantly agrees that avoiding the fight is the most efficient path, though his posture slumps in defeat. He lets out a heavy sigh, feeling a strange sense of deflation as the adrenaline fades away. Vim wonders why he feels this disappointment, confused by his own lingering desire to fight. The captain pops open a bottle and hands Vim some dried meat, thanking him for speeding up their exploration significantly. While eating, the captain reflects that Vim's extreme versatility actually makes it difficult to decide how best to utilize him. Back at the guild office, Camilla asks the newly joined Vim to explain his enchantment techniques, specifically regarding the floor boss fight. Vim agrees to explain, while Camilla assures him he only needs to share what he is comfortable with. Camilla listens intently, convinced that his explanation will finally confirm her suspicions about the true nature of his abilities. Vim explains his template enchanting method, using pre-made codes, causing Camilla to realize he is a legitimate genius. She asks about the risks of using it on others, confirming it usually results in nothing worse than muscle fatigue and pain. Camilla presses further, asking the critical question of what happens if the casting fails when applied to himself. Vim states matter-of-factly that the specific body part involved gets damaged as a result. Camilla notes with concern that this is a serious flaw in his technique. Vim reveals that during the floor boss fight, he cast enhancement directly on his own brain to boost his stats. Camilla looks at him in horror, asking what would have happened if that specific enchantment had failed. Vim shrugs and admits he would have lost consciousness or suffered brain damage, treating it as a minor detail. He laughs that he only survived due to lucky coincidences, leaving Camilla stunned by the extreme danger he accepted. Camilla stares at him, refusing to believe it was luck, and realizing he likely underestimates his own success rates. She looks at the boy who throws himself into mortal danger repeatedly, just as the captain shouts that there is an emergency. Bettina realizes they are about to be surrounded and frantically suggests they retreat immediately. She proposes falling back to rendezvous with the main group before the beasts close in. Camilla calculates the odds, estimating Vim can handle 1 or 2 beasts, but worrying about the 3 large ones present. She makes a split-second decision and issues a direct order for Vim to engage the enemy. A wyvern shrieks in agony as it is shredded by a sudden lethal blast of silver confetti. The massive beast crashes to the ground with a heavy thud, silenced in an instant. Camilla confirms the first kill, but warns Vim that a second wyvern and a chimera remain active. She asks him point blank if he can handle the remaining threats alone. Vim replies with a calm, singular yes, despite the overwhelming odds. He steals his resolve and dashes forward to intercept the next monster. Camilla watches in shock as Vim announces he is switching his suit to Puppet Master mode. He activates the device, triggering an instant amplification that boosts his abilities 20 times over. Vim tears through the battlefield with inhuman speed, screaming as he unleashes a flurry of attacks. Amidst the violence, he questions his own sanity for using the dangerous Puppet Master mode. He realizes that if he cared about safety, he never would have used it, knowing it was too much even last time. A massive lion beast lunges, and Vim acknowledges he is dancing on the razor's edge of death. He wonders if he is pushing himself this far just to live up to everyone's expectations. Gripping his dagger with blood-slicked hands, he dismisses the doubt with a firm nevertheless. He decides to stop thinking and focus entirely on surviving the carnage right in front of him. Vim stands victorious amidst the smoke and corpses of the beast he just slaughtered. The rest of the guild erupts into cheers, chanting his name as he stands panting in the aftermath. Camilla approaches him solemnly, recognizing the risky technique as the same one he used on the floor boss. Vim assures her he has control over it and is holding up better than he expected. Camilla advises him not to push himself too far, her concern breaking through her professional demeanor. Vim smiles through the grime and agrees, accepting her warning with a nod. The scene shifts to the sunlit streets of Virbron, where banners fly high in celebration of the victory. Townspeople whisper in disbelief that a mere kid could have possibly taken down a floor boss. They confuse the unimposing Vim with the hulking Abel, unable to reconcile the rumor with reality. Skeptical eyes follow Vim, labeling the hunched figure as a gloomy loner. Vim forces himself to straighten his back, determined to change his image now that he is a night dragonfly. He is startled from his thoughts by a sudden, friendly tap on his shoulder. Hyde Mary pops up with a cheerful grin, teasing him as she greets him. She welcomes him as an official colleague and congratulates him on joining the guild. Vim thanks her, but she immediately scolds him for rushing his hospital discharge just to avoid visitors. She reveals she deduced he used the Puppet Master app to stimulate his pituitary gland for faster healing. She glares at him with a pout, warning him that such reckless behavior is definitely not okay. Her expression softens as she asks if he actually likes the people in Night Dragonfly. Vim looks surprised by the question, but answers honestly with a soft smile that he does. Hyde Mary smiles back, relieved to confirm that inviting him was the right choice. She reflects internally that it is frustrating not being able to truly listen to the contents of his heart. The official guild notice declares the subjugation of the 97th floor boss formally recognized, cementing the achievement in history. Inside the guild house, the remaining members of Dragon's Wing gather around the table to process the long-awaited news. The swordsman leans back and comments that the bureaucracy certainly took them long enough, while others express relief that they can finally relax. Sophia holds the notice with a troubled look, noting that the atmosphere around Dragon's Wing has been terrible lately due to the gossip. She explains that ever since Vim was kicked out, more people have started to openly doubt the party's actual strength. Behind her glasses, her eyes narrow as she admits to herself that the critics are right, and the party lacks the power to defeat a floor boss. She accepts this harsh reality, acknowledging that their current formation is simply not strong enough. Sophia reflects that even without knowing the full details, there is no doubt Vim was a huge part of their victory against the floor boss. Kronos slams a document onto the table, announcing the massive 500,000 bounty for the subjugation to distract them. He explains that they need the leader's magic seal to cash the check and looks towards Sophia. With a casual flick of his wrist, he tosses the key containing the seal across the table to her. Sophia fumbles to catch the key midair, surprised by his sudden and careless action. She stares at the key, realizing it is a sign of trust to hand such an important item to a newcomer, yet she feels uneasy. A chill runs down her spine as she shivers, dreading the reckless future that Kronos is undoubtedly planning. Kronos declares with a grin that they are now officially an A-rank party both in name and on paper. A flashback reveals Vim asking her if she really doesn't plan on quitting, his concern evident in his voice. Vim smiles reassuringly in her memory, advising that there is no need to do anything crazy since the reward will keep them afloat for a while. Desperate to follow that safe path, Sophia speaks up and tries to push back against her leader's dangerous ambitions. She suggests diving into the 98th floor ahead of schedule now that they have some breathing room. She reasons that if they go now, they are guaranteed to turn a steady profit without excessive risk. Kronos rejects the idea instantly, declaring with absolute finality that they are heading for the 99th floor. Sophia looks down in defeat, sweat beading on her face as her attempt to inject logic into the conversation fails completely. Kronos lectures the group, insisting that while others chase short-term gains, Dragon's Wing must push ahead to stay on the front lines. He spreads his arms wide and proclaims that this relentless drive is the true identity of their party. The new female recruits squeal and swoon over his coolness, while Sophia wonders if his bravado is born of pure desperation. She realizes he is driven by a burning need to wash away all the humiliating rumors floating around the city. A flashback shows the party members screaming in denial, refusing to accept the fact that Vim took down a floor boss alone. Sophia looks at Kronos' determined smile and understands he is desperate to prove his own true skills on the 99th floor. The towering stone entrance of the labyrinth looms ahead, waiting to swallow the adventurers whole. A rhythmic marching sound echoes as the newly reborn Dragon's Wing moves out with 48 female recruits in tow. The massive party of 52 marches forward, prioritizing quantity over quality in a desperate bid for power. Narrative text explains that efficient movement between transfer gates is critical to reaching the front lines quickly. Large, organized parties like Nachtleibel have mapped and maintained all the paths to ensure smooth travel. Dragon's Wing possesses no such advantage, forcing them to use dangerous secret gates to advance through the labyrinth. As a result, they are forced to fight their way through several tough spots just to move forward a single inch. The brutal pace takes its toll, with half of the new recruits dropping out from exhaustion before even reaching the 98th floor. A sharp clap of hands cuts through the air, signaling a halt to the grueling march. Kronos stands before his exhausted troops with a bright smile, announcing that this is where the rail challenge begins. The recruits pant heavily, their faces pale with exhaustion and fear as they stare into the darkness of the cave. Sophia observes the group critically, noting that while the overall standard is low, a few experienced adventurers remain among them. Kronos stands before the gathered recruits and welcomes them as proud new members of Dragon's Wing. He declares that they have finally arrived at the true front lines of the labyrinth, signaling the start of their real mission. Screaming with wide-eyed intensity, he assures the fearful group that he is with them and commands them not to fear. The recruits look around with sweat on their faces, anxiety radiating from them as Kronos shouts for them to unite their hearts as one. He preaches about the glory and honor that await them after this dive, claiming he can already see the victory clearly in his mind. Kronos points forward with manic confidence, announcing that the 99th floor awaits and ordering the group to move out immediately. The party steps into a dense, primordial forest, the landscape teeming with massive trees and overgrowth unlike anything seen on previous floors. They trudge through the thick vegetation, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the dense undergrowth of the jungle-like environment. Kronos and his core team lead the way with confidence, while the new recruits look around in confusion and unease at the strange surroundings. A recruit wipes sweat from his brow, questioning the stifling heat of the place and the alien nature of the environment. Another recruit looks up in sheer disbelief, questioning if they are truly inside a labyrinth upon seeing what appears to be a real sky. The wind rustles through the canopy above, emphasizing how completely different this floor is from the stone corridors they are accustomed to. Kronos grins with a terrifyingly wide expression, his eyes shadowed and manic as he processes the reality of their location. The sounds of the party moving through the brush echo as Kronos praises their progress, muttering, "Very good," to himself. He laughs uncontrollably, reveling in the fact that he has descended into a floor where no one has ever set foot before. Standing atop a rocky outcrop, Kronos announces to the mass below that they have finally reached the front lines of the labyrinth. He shouts that this feat will go down in history, demanding that they maintain communication and trust to succeed. A voice from the crowd interrupts his grand speech, calling out for the boss to hold up a minute. Kronos pauses and turns his head, addressing the interrupter as Rebecca and asking what she wants. Rebecca questions why they aren't using communication magic, pointing out that coordinating this many people without it is impossible. Kronos dismisses the concern immediately, stating that they have always just called out to each other and don't need magic in their group. Rebecca pushes back with visible frustration, arguing that regular talking only worked because they used to be a small party. She insists that heading into unknown territory with such a massive group requires a real plan for movement and coordination. Kronos ignores her valid concerns completely, turning away to call for Miles and declaring that he has a plan. With a cold, unfeeling expression, he orders the mage to burn the entire forest to the ground. Miles begins her chant, reciting the incantation, "The twin lines shall never fade," to unleash a devastating spell. A massive magical circle appears in the sky, crackling with energy as she casts the high-level spell Inferno Torrent. A pillar of white-hot fire crashes down from the heavens, obliterating a massive section of the forest with an explosive impact. The recruits shield their eyes from the blinding light and searing heat as the shockwave washes over them. The forest burns intensely, the flames consuming the ancient vegetation and clearing a path through the dense growth. Miles stands amidst the smoke and ash, declaring that they can now move forward safely since nothing is left alive. The recruits stare in awe at the destruction, whispering that this scale of magic-proved dragon's wing is truly an A-rank party. Kronos explains that while they had to be careful with fire on lower levels due to oxygen limits, the open sky here allows them to unleash hell. He raises his hand and orders everyone to follow Miles' example and burn the rest of the forest down. Spreading his arms wide, he screams that beasts fear fire and commands them to roast the monsters to ashes. A veteran adventurer with an eye patch turns to Sophia and abruptly quits, telling her he is out. He walks away without looking back, instructing her to tell the boss he doesn't even need his payment. As he leaves, he thinks to himself that Kronos is a fool for believing magical monsters are the same as ordinary animals. He reasons that while weak monsters fear flames, stronger ones only get smarter and more resistant, a logic Sophia realizes she cannot argue with. A piercing screech echoes from the sky above, signaling the arrival of a massive threat drawn by the fire. The veteran adventurer warns Sophia to ditch the party while she still can, noting grimly that the real monsters have arrived. Sophia hesitates, torn between the instinct to flee and the realization that survival must come first in this chaos. A shadow emerges from the swirling smoke, shocking the recruits as they realize it is not a beast, but a terrifying monster. As the figure draws closer, they recoil in horror upon discovering it is a humanoid type, distinct from any normal beast they have faced. Thick smoke from the fire blinds them completely, panic rising as they scream that they cannot see the enemy. Agonized screams erupt from the darkness as the unseen threat tears through their ranks, sending recruits crashing to the ground. A girl shrieks in confusion while others look around wildly, demanding to know what is happening. The night consumes the group as they shout for the enemy's location and beg for orders that never come. An observer notes the spreading chaos, realizing that without leadership, the party is spiraling toward total destruction. A commander roars above the den, ordering everyone to form a defensive line and back up together to survive. He vows to protect them all, urging the terrified recruits to stay calm and hold their ground. Screams echo from every direction as the enemy strikes again, leaving the recruits trembling in absolute terror. They realize with sinking hearts that retreat is impossible because they are completely surrounded on all sides. Eerie noises emanate from the jungle, amplifying the fear gripping their hearts. A hand emerges from the bushes, and Kronos identifies the creature as a new species of monkey-type monster. The monkeys slam their hands against the ground in unison, creating a rhythmic ban-ban sound that resembles a ritual. Recruits wonder if it is music or a ceremony, struggling to believe that monsters could be intelligent enough to take such noticeable actions. Kronos grins with a disturbing mix of excitement and madness, noting that they appear to be the first explorers to reach this point. A sudden, deafening impact blasts through the air, creating a shockwave that rattles the adventurers to their core. The boss opens its eyes, unleashing a glare so intense and terrifying that it paralyzes those who meet it. A heavy thud shakes the ground as a member falls, prompting a comrade to rush over and frantically ask if they are okay. A man clutches his chest, gasping for air as he struggles to breathe under the crushing weight of the boss's pressure. Sophia stares wide-eyed, overwhelmed by the sheer suffocating presence of the entity standing before them. Terror grips the group as they scream the realization that this is no ordinary monster, but the floor boss itself. A reckless adventurer shouts that he doesn't need Kronos and charges forward, unleashing a wind cutter spell to prove his strength. The boss dodges the attack with effortless grace, leaving the attacker staring in stunned disbelief. The boy gasps in shock, unable to comprehend how his attack missed its target completely. The boss prepares a lethal finger flick, warning the human not to dare underestimate it. Kronos watches with wide eyes as the monster launches its counterattack in the blink of an eye. With a sickening sound, the adventurer is sliced in half, a fountain of blood erupting from his body. His headless corpse hits the ground with a heavy thud, leaving Sophia frozen in horror at the brutal sight. Sophia realizes her instincts were right all along, confirming that winning this fight is an absolute impossibility. She admits to herself that facing a floor boss here means certain death. Her legs give out from under her, and she questions in panic why she cannot stand or move. Monkeys sitting in the trees mock the helpless adventurers, waving their hands and jeering at their plight. They wear creepy, toothy grins that send shivers down the spines of everyone watching. Suddenly, the monsters lunge forward to attack, signaling the start of the final slaughter. Sophia forces herself to act, realizing she must do something desperately to save them. The monkeys close in with terrifying teeth bared, death visible in their vicious expressions. Sophia screams for everyone to get behind her, trying futilely to offer some protection. The monsters descend upon them, and the scene dissolves into a massacre of screams and blood. Kronos' eye snaps open with a sharp sound as consciousness suddenly returns to him in an unfamiliar room. He sits up in the bed, looking around the well-furnished room in confusion and wondering where exactly he is. A voice calls out to ask if Lord Kronos is finally awake, startling him as he notices a presence nearby. Kronos stares at the stranger with his one visible eye, demanding to know who they are while nursing his bandaged face. The hooded figure confirms they brought him here, prompting Kronos to ask if this place is a hospital. The stranger delivers the grim news that he was defeated by the 99th floor master and that many of his team are dead or missing. Kronos screams in denial, clutching his chest as the sharp pain of reality strikes him hard. He crouches on the bed in disbelief, struggling to process the nightmare and asking himself what the hell happened. The plague sets in as he frantically shouts the names of his party members, desperate to know if Sophia and the others survived. The hooded figure calmly reassures him that, fortunately, those specific 3 are still among the living. The stranger begins a philosophical monologue, speaking in a slow and deliberate tone that confuses the bedridden adventurer. He speaks of the cruel fate that befalls those who charge first into battle, lamenting the misfortune that struck a warrior of Kronos' caliber. Urging Kronos to compose himself, the figure argues that despite the heavy losses, his efforts undeniably advance the conquest of the 99th floor. Kronos stares blankly at the hooded man, asking once again who exactly is standing before him. The figure bows deeply at the bedside, declaring that they hold Lord Kronos in the highest esteem, and it is an honor to assist him. Kronos reacts with pure shock, unable to comprehend the sudden display of reverence from this mysterious stranger. The stranger explains that even extraordinary talents can be hindered when circumstances or a lack of information block their path. He contrasts this with those who stumble into success by sheer chance, claiming this incident perfectly illustrates that unfair truth. Kronos listens with a darkened expression as the stranger asks if that specific statement rings any bells for him. Recognizing the logic, Kronos mutters his agreement and urges the mysterious man to continue his explanation. The figure finally lowers his hood to reveal a creepy smile and a monocle, introducing himself as Jirian while apologizing for the delay. Jiren laughs with a sinister hi-hi, asking Kronos to please remember him from now on as a new alliance forms. Walking through the bleak streets, the atmosphere is suffocating as the survivors process the aftermath of their devastating failure. Passers-by whisper cruelly as they recognize the cloaked woman, identifying her with disdain of the disgraced Dragon's Wing Guild. The verbal abuse escalates into physical aggression as a furious local screams, "Liar!" and hurls an object at her. A bottle shatters against the wall just inches from her, the sound of the crash ringing out as a violent rejection of her presence. Clutching her groceries tightly, she flees the scene while the mob continues to jeer and demand to know where she went. This hostility stems from the disastrous failure on the 99th floor by the Dragon's Wing, a catastrophe that claimed lives and ruined their reputation. Hidden beneath her hood, she trembles with anxiety, knowing that rumors of the 97th floor boss's defeat have only intensified the public scrutiny. A concerned voice breaks through her panic, asking gently if she is okay. Back at their base, the surviving party members lament that the public backlash is so severe they can barely go out to shop for supplies. The door swings open with a heavy thud, revealing Kronos standing there, bandaged and looking utterly drained. The women in the room gasp in sheer shock at his sudden and haggard appearance. Overcoming their surprise, they rush toward him, shouting his name and demanding to know if he was actually discharged from the hospital. Seeing his condition, the narrator realizes that this latest defeat has struck a devastating blow to Kronos' spirit. Tears well up in their eyes as they look upon their leader, murmuring his name in heartbreak. Kronos lowers his head in apology, asking softly if his sudden arrival scared them. He grimly admits that the floor boss displayed a terrifying gap in strength that completely overwhelmed them. Addressing the group, he expresses deep remorse for those who died, acknowledging that their preparation was insufficient against such power. The mage listens in horror as Kronos claims everything collapsed solely because of bad luck rather than a lack of skill. Desperate to salvage morale, Kronos insists that the fact they survived amid such misfortune is a victory in itself. He argues maniacally that their survival proves their real ability, despite it being their first encounter with the 99th floor boss. The mage stares at him in disbelief, terrified by his refusal to accept reality and wondering why he is deluding himself. Unhinged, Kronos declares that if they can just show their true abilities next time, they will surely succeed. Burning with a desperate and dangerous ambition, he demands to handle the command one more time, swearing he will succeed. Covering the horrified look in his teammates' eyes, he forces a smile and urges them to work hard together again. Elsewhere, a mysterious cloaked figure carries a heavy load, chuckling with a sinister hi in the shadows. The scene shifts to a dungeon environment, where footsteps echo as a new group approaches a dark cave entrance. A squad of armored soldiers marches forward with precision, their movements synchronized and rapid. The soldiers marvel at the effects of Vim's running enhancement, admitting they can barely manage the pace without his magic support. A warning cry goes out that a large monster lies ahead, and the squad is ordered to keep their guard up. A subordinate turns to the captain, asking for immediate orders on how to engage the threat. Camilla, the silver hair, commands them to send 2 people forward as magic circles flare to life. Vim charges into the fray with a fierce grin, calling out to Hidamari to signal the start of their attack. Hidamari responds with high energy, preparing her spell as she shouts her readiness. Unleashing her magic, she casts a powerful water spear directly at the enemy. The spell impacts with tremendous force, obliterating the target in a massive explosion of water and debris. Celebrating their perfect execution, Vim and Hidamari share a cheerful high five amidst the dust. The surrounding soldiers praise their wonderful teamwork, noting that such synergy is expected of childhood friends. Reflecting on the timeline since the defeat of the 98th floor boss, Hidamari playfully asks Vim about his future, noting they make a great pair. The narrative returns to the present, noting that the investigation of the 98th floor is now nearing its final stage. The expedition team marches steadily into the darkness of the cave, ready to face whatever lies deep within the dungeon. As the group descends deeper into the earth, they marvel at the sheer depth of the dungeon, realizing they have finally reached its innermost recesses. Vim stares intently at his digital map, his brow furrowed as he tries to make sense of the complex, labyrinthine structure displayed on the screen. Breaking the silence, he idly wonders aloud just how far one could physically dig into a labyrinth floor, prompting a confused look from his companion. The veteran soldier stares back at him with pure bewilderment, unable to comprehend why anyone would ask such a bizarre question. Vim blinks in confusion, realizing too late that his casual curiosity has completely baffled his teammate. Bursting into hearty laughter, the soldier tells Vim that overthinking the labyrinth's logic won't give him any answers and calls him hilarious. Feeling a bit embarrassed, Vim awkwardly scratches his cheek and admits that he probably said something weird. The soldier shakes his head with a grin, noting that normal adventurers simply don't concern themselves with the structural mechanics of the dungeon. Their conversation is cut short as they arrive at their destination, the atmosphere shifting as they step into a vast, crystalline chamber. Gigantic crystals jut from the ground and walls, shimmering in the dim light and creating an otherworldly landscape. The path ahead is lined with these towering, luminous formations, leading the expedition toward the heart of the floor. A grand pathway opens up before them, flanked by sheer cliffs of crystal that guide them toward a dark, imposing entrance. Realizing the significance of the location, the squad identifies this area as the legendary Treasure Vault, home to the teleportation orbs. A wave of triumph washes over the group as they cheer wildly, celebrating the fact that they have finally reached the end of their journey. The narrator explains that the Treasure Vault is a secret location that only reveals itself after the floor boss has been defeated. Within this vault lies not only the labyrinth's greatest treasures, but also a special teleportation orb that connects directly to the 99th floor. Vim gazes around in pure awe, overwhelmed by the grandeur of the vault as he admits it is his first time seeing such a sight. Turning to his childhood friend, a voice gently asks Hyde Mary if she finds the scenery beautiful. Hyde Mary's face lights up with a radiant, childlike smile as she takes in the breathtaking view. Vim watches her reaction, his heart skipping a beat as he sees the pure joy and wonder in her expression. The soldiers tease their leader, Camilla, noting that even the stoic boss is sparkling with excitement like a little kid. Blustered by the accusation, Camilla stammers a denial, insisting she is acting the same way she always does. Vim smiles fondly as he observes Hyde Mary, thinking to himself that she has always possessed this kind of untamed adventurous spirit. Camilla stands at the edge of a crystal pool, her cape fluttering as she surveys the area and prepares to give the next order. Just as Camilla calls out for Vim to move, a sudden gripping sound interrupts her command as Hyde Mary makes her move. Vim lets out a confused gasp as he is abruptly grabbed, his balance thrown off by the unexpected force. A long, terrified scream echoes through the cavern as Vim is forcibly dragged off the ledge against his will. Hyde Mary leaps fearlessly into the void, dragging a screaming Vim along with her as she shouts for him to look. As they freefall past the cliff face, the surrounding oars sparkle intensely, turning their descent into a glittering light show. They crash into the water below with a massive splash, and Vim, emerging from the depths, breathless, admits that the view really is beautiful. Coughing up water, Vim struggles to regain his composure after the sudden and violent plunge. He immediately turns to scold Hyde Mary, yelling that they don't have time for sightseeing in the middle of a mission. Unfazed by his anger, Hyde Mary simply laughs and points upward, urging him to ignore the mission for a second and look at the view. The cavern's ceiling sparkles like a starry night sky, a breathtaking panorama of bioluminescence and crystal. Hyde Mary beams at him with a smile so bright it rivals the scenery, her joy completely infectious. Captivated by both the view and her happiness, Vim softens his expression and quietly agrees that it is indeed amazing. The moment is ruined as another body splashes down right next to them, sending a new wave of water crashing over Vim. The massive warrior Abel lands heavily, barking at someone to get out of the way while calling them an idiot. High above, another teammate leaps off the ledge with a playful cry, only to realize midair that the height is actually terrifying. She screams for someone to catch her before crashing down into the water with a chaotic, heavy impact. Vim sits on the damp ground, wringing out his soaked clothes, while Monica apologizes cheerfully to Yui nearby. Recovering quickly, Vim marvels at the massive crystals surrounding them, identifying the brilliant shine as valuable adamantite. Hyde Mary hops excitedly around the cavern, pointing out deposits of mithril with the boundless energy of a rabbit. Watching her exuberance, Vim notes with a smile that he hasn't seen Hyde Mary act this carefree in a very long time. Suddenly, she leans in uncomfortably close with a fierce blush, startling Vim with her intensity. She breathlessly explains that her behavior is due to the fact that her dream is finally coming true right now. Vim looks confused by her statement, prompting her to ask if he really doesn't understand what she means. With a bright smile, she reminds him that they are currently on an adventure together, just like they always wanted. The realization strikes Vim, and he murmurs a soft acknowledgement as her words sink in. He recalls that he used to view the world that way once, not having forgotten the feeling so much as misplaced it. It feels to him as if he left that sense of wonder somewhere far away, lost in the grind of his responsibilities. Looking at her beaming face, he realizes that this adventurous spirit is exactly what led him to Fielbrunn in the first place, proving she hasn't changed at all. Meanwhile, the analysis of the artifacts concludes that one orb connects to the 27th floor, while the other leads directly to the 99th floor. The group agrees that they must keep this treasure vault a secret, recognizing the immense strategic value of such a shortcut. Vim stares nervously at the glowing circle, swallowing hard as the reality hits him that the deadly 99th floor lies just beyond that light. He tries to shake off the dread, telling himself to focus on his work rather than getting paralyzed by fear of what lies ahead. Attributing his strange anxiety to exhaustion, his thoughts are interrupted by a rustling sound nearby. A mysterious figure emerges from the shadows, greeting him intimately as young Vim. The man expresses his gratitude, thanking Vim for progressing this far so quickly, though Vim tries to deflect the praise. The stranger insists on the compliment, stating that it would be rude to deny the fact that everyone appreciates Vim's work. Flustered and humbled, Vim vows to keep working hard to contribute to the guild's success. The man squeezes Vim's shoulder tightly, declaring him the ace of the Nachtleibel and asserting that he is counting on him. Vim feels the weight of the hand on his shoulder, accepting the natural responsibility and pressure that comes with his position. His eyes darken with determination as he internalizes that the night dragonfly is his place, and he wants to carry that burden. He resolves to get his act together and become a better person, one whom everyone can truly value and rely upon. However, a dissonance creeps in as he wonders if these whispering voices of validation are really something he should be listening to. As Vim departs, a lone, cloaked figure remains behind in the silence of the crystal cavern as a magic circle activates. The mysterious entity stands perfectly still in the shadows, watching the faint glow of the teleportation device.